now starting. We are officially live, ladies and gentlemen. Always good to be in the
All
pocket
right.
with you fellas. As we're allowing folks out there in the listening audience to stream the stream, we may give them just a couple of moments, as is customary, for a live event like this. The first time that we did this was, of course, a special occasion. It was around the holidays. Now it's an all-new special occasion, which is let's say it's the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landings. That'll be our special occasion tonight, huh?
That's a pretty good one.
Hey, it works as good as any.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well,
Better than most, actually.
People shall be filing in here momentarily, and the interface always changes, so I've got to try and remember. Let's see, we've got our links down here, and there's generally a way to monitor all this stuff. So as you guys can imagine, there's plenty that's going on back here in what we call master control. Let's see. Okay. All is looking good right there and out there. And of course, we have the live interactive chat. So anybody who is there tuning into our stream right now, we might want to remind them there in the chat room to refresh their video relays. Go ahead and start that, and they should be able to join the live broadcast. Thanks to the wonders of Einstein and the general relativity theory, we have geosynchronous orbit satellites all around the world that are helping keep this program within a mere second or so of lag, depending on where you are around the world. So folks are going to be able to hear this broadcast in near real time. The science is almost perfect. Give it a few more years, and China will figure out exactly how to do it right and then not share it with anybody else, right?
Yeah.
The way it goes. All right. Well, I think all the technical stuff is taken care of on our end of things, and we can go ahead and get rolling if you guys are ready. As is customary, before we do anything, we have to raise a glass. So whatever you have, whatever kind of vessel you may be holding in your hand, it is apropos that you grab that, lift it in defiance against gravity. All this physics tonight is archaeology. And just take a quick sip, and then we'll hit the cue the theme song. Oh, it's so delicious when it hits your lips.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers, everyone. I think
Cheers.
you probably all know what we have. Hopefully you all have something equally as good.
That's right. Okay. I think we're ready to go. So everybody stand by for just a moment, and we're going to go ahead and enter the Cross Time Pub.
We raise a glass to the past and the ladies cross the ages, fallen fathers from the motherland whose lives are on the page. And the father said it best when he told us all the world's a stage. Oh, so fellas, grab a glass and lift your spirits to the seventh age.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, around the globe. It is the Seven Ages Audio Journal coming to you live right here via the fine folks out there in Silicon Valley, YouTube, and the extraordinary technology afforded us every day in the everyday. And we are putting it to good use as we look back in time and study the past. Joining me, as always, are my cohorts and comrades, Mr. James Waldo and Jason Pentrail. Jason, I see you donned the appropriate headgear for tonight's little shindig.
Oh, yeah. It's a special occasion. You got to dress up and be ready, right?
Yes, you do. And James, now always ready, semper fi, as you are.
Yeah. That's a Marine thing. I'm not a Marine, so it's I guess we'll say hua, or maybe when I join the Army, be all you can be.
Yeah, you have the most interesting story tonight, I think. I don't know, almost as interesting as Jason's hat. Can you even disclose your location right now? Can you even tell us where you are and what you're up to?
Well, I can say I'm in Columbus, Georgia tonight. Didn't get home to get back to the studio like I wanted to, but we're making it work. And it's just one of those days where duty calls and we got to make it work, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Duty calls. You know, that reminds me of something funny. I guess you guys have probably been following this bizarre situation that has emerged. Some guy goes on internet and says something strange, and it was intended to be ironic in that millennial sense of things, but the unexpected happens. And now there are, I think, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who are saying that they're going to storm America's most clandestine base out there, the Groom Lake facility, otherwise known as Dreamland, Watertown, or more commonly, Area 51.
Yeah.
And yeah, this has become a thing. I've seen Vice reporting on this. I've seen Time Magazine reporting on this. I got my own thoughts about it. And in fact, I almost went viral again last night, guys, because I tweeted about this. The Area 51 documentary film you never knew existed, filmed on location in 1960. And this was actually a film that was made for the employees of the, or rather the families of the employees who were working on the top secret U-2 spy plane under the behest of the CIA at that time. But the reason all this comes to mind is because you said duty calls, and I'm just thinking, I came up with a funny joke about all this. I stopped at the Little Ailey Inn, and I had the chili instead of the hot dog, and I got a bad case of the Naruto runs.
Ah.
Now, those who aren't familiar with Naruto running, this was one of the ideas that was proposed in the original Facebook meetup or event group. They say that if we Naruto run, this is a reference to an anime character who places his arms behind his back, sort of like this, and head down and face forward, and he runs and can quickly outrun bullets. And they said, we can move faster than your bullets. So I don't know about you guys, but I'd rather not go out there in the desert and get a bad case of the Naruto runs at Area 51.
You know, I was thinking about this earlier, and I, you know, being a former military person, I thought of it from the guards' perspective and from the people that work there. And the thing that I thought of was, I would not want to be the guy that had to clean up that mess that would result from that potential incursion into restricted space.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, no, that would definitely be a scene you would probably want to steer clear of if you were on duty that day for sure.
Yeah, I think I'd call in.
You know, I was actually thinking about this a little bit more in depth. As we all know, this was, as best we can tell, was started as a joke on Facebook. You know, basically it was, you know, it was under the kind of the title of let's all gather, you know, several miles outside and all storm Area 51 and find out what's really there. When you look at the logistics of the base and all that, we realize that this probably isn't actually possible, but it's a joke. And it's one of those things that a lot of people have kind of taken seriously. And when the date comes, as we know, somebody's going to show up. So there's been over there's been over 1 million people say that they're planning on attending this event, at least through Facebook. But when the day comes, we all know that there's a core group of people who will actually show up for something like this. And therefore, I actually think in a way this sets sort of a dangerous precedent in that people are going to start to think that they can do this anywhere. So what happens if, you know, 20,000 people show up and decide they're going to bum rush the White House?
Don't give them any ideas, Jason.
Or the Pentagon or any other thing. You know what I'm saying? So while it may seem like a joke, it could set a precedent of this type of behavior in the future, which does make it actually a dangerous type of event.
Yeah, you know, you're right. And I'll say that even though, you know, in the public mind, it's kind of a new idea, I would think that somebody has thought of this already on the military side of the house. And there's probably a contingency for it already.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. This isn't going to be like a situation that's never popped up before. It's always a numbers game. You know, there's always more citizens than there are military or police. So this isn't anything that's new, but I think the danger comes in that it gets people thinking about it. It gets people considering things like that. And that's where it can become dangerous for, you know, the people involved.
Absolutely. And plus, if you get the Naruto runs out there in the desert, I mean, you could get dehydrated. It's hot, arid climate. Not a good idea, ladies and gents. Hey, we'd like to hear from you. And of course, throughout the course of the evening, we would love to take calls from our listenership, people who have questions, comments, ideas. And yes, eventually the conversation is going to be shifting more over to history, archaeology, science, and culture. But we're always happy to hear from you guys. If you've got a relevant topic, the numbers to call in are 828-398-4886 anywhere in the continental United States. You can also, if you prefer not to call in, You can text us, and that number is simply 828-367-7201. We will be monitoring all feeds, channels, and streams, and hoping to hear from fine folks with good ideas tonight. Boy, it sounds like from this opening banner, guys, we could use some good ideas right about now.
Yeah.
Well, keeping up with the news, we don't make this stuff up. We're just reporting on it. And, tonight actually gives us a rare opportunity because we usually only come out with, 1 to 2 shows a month. And sometimes the news is old by the time we're able to get to it, or we have a guest in an interview and we're just not able to comment on a lot of the things that's going on in the world. So, this show is fun and it's a little bit more lighthearted, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about things that are happening right now that we don't always have the opportunity to address. So, yeah, call in, let us know what you're thinking about. We can talk about, any of our things that we address here on the show, or you just want to let us know what you think about some things, or just chat with us for a few minutes and say hi. Yeah, call that number. Again, that's 828-398-4886 in the continental United States. Give us a call and let us know what you're thinking about the show, or just chat in general.
Yeah, there's also a couple of other ways I should mention people can reach us. If you would like to go to 7ages.org, we have right there on the main page the very first link you can click, and that is the actual link to this live show where we had the video embed. But if you scroll down the page, in addition to all the information about the numbers and the text message line, you can also join the live chat right there. All you're going to do is provide a name, and if you like, a URL, and then insert your messages. You can join that chat, and we'll be keeping tabs on that over the course of the evening as well. And then finally, info@7ages.org is the catch-all email address that you can use to reach all of the team members over the course of the live program and the ensuing discussion. So we'll put all that information out periodically throughout the evening. Let's see. So guys, we're already halfway through July, and there are so many things that we've wanted to do this year. One of those, Jason, especially, I know you had wanted to go to Cahokia. We have not made our way up to Cahokia yet. I know someone who has, a good friend of ours, Tim McMillan, who we may be hearing from a little later tonight if he gets a chance to call in. He was there recently, and it wasn't his first time going, but we did talk on the telephone about this the other day, and he gave me some insights about the state of the park and what it's used for. And he seemed to kind of mirror a lot of the same sorts of sentiments that I think that we all came away from our trip to Ohio and visiting some of the very famous sites up there in Ohio that Squire and Davis originally mapped and documented. And, these ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley. Probably preeminent among those had been Mound City, not to be confused with Moundville. I always do this. I mix up Moundville and Mound City. So we went to Moundville last year, but the year before that, Mound City up in Ohio. And when you go to these sites, it's incredible because we're driving up the highway, we see a sign that says Hopewell site. And we're like, cool, we should go check that out. And it ended up being one of the most incredible things that we saw the entire time we were on the road. And the folks, the curators there at the actual facility are telling us, oh, yeah, it's funny. People think we're a golf course. See a big field with earth mounds and stuff. They think it's a golf course. People have so little.
Hole in one.
Yeah. Well, we found a hole in one by going up there and speaking to Bill, one of the curators and I remember he said to us at one point, this was my big takeaway, and I apologize if I'm being redundant because I'm sure I've told this story a few times before, but he kind of looks at us at one point and kind of goes, guys, when I came into this, I was a skeptic in the sense that he didn't believe that there were all of these celestial alignments with these earthworks. And he said, it is remarkable, the geometric prowess and the astronomical prowess that the people who built these structures had. This is a highly sophisticated setup we're looking at here. It's not, in fact, actually, it may be more sophisticated than a lot of modern golf courses, or at very least on par with, and not purely for entertainment. This was something that was utilized to chart the passing of the seasons. They would plant their crops by this. There were obvious ceremonial implications of what was being used and constructed there. So much going on when you visit these sites. Incidentally, while we were there, Dr. Bradley Lepper of the Ohio History Connection was there. We didn't get a chance to talk to him that day, but he graciously joined us on the program for an interview a few weeks later where we talked about that site and many others there in Ohio. But, Dr. Lepper is somebody I absolutely, I just have tremendous respect for Dr. Lepper, all the work that he and the fine folks at the Ohio History Connection have done. I wish we could have joined their tour. We were all out there taking it in the field, and here is Brad Lepper, who is basically Ohio archaeology personified, in my opinion. And he's leading this tour, and we're all just wishing we could just be flies on the wall
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's why we go out, so we talk about doing the show, and there's a reason we don't have a show every single week. It's because we're all full-time employed and working in various disciplines, but more than that, we go visit places, and we have things that we're writing and researching. We have a lot going on. It's important for us to be able to get out and actually see these sites, and it never fails. No matter where we go, we always end up finding something that we didn't expect, learning more than we thought we already knew when we got there. And I just encourage people, get out and see these places. We talked about this on the show before. Nearly every town or city in every state has a local place that you can go see and put hands on and participate in, oftentimes with conservation, volunteer work. But most people don't know they're there, just like you said. Brad Lepper, Dr. Brad Lepper, probably the most prominent Ohio archaeologist that we can think of, he told us the story, during an episode that he was on with us on Seven Ages, talking about the car dealership literally across the street from the mounds. And yet the car salesman had no idea what he was talking about. So, I mean, literally the history is right in front of this guy, and he had no clue that it was there. So it's, that type of thing. You have to seek these things out, do a little reading, do a little research. But another thing is, these places need support. They need funding. They need people to show up and see them and participate in them. So find out what's close to you. Find out what's a day trip or a weekend trip that you can take your family and go out there. And I'll say this for another thing, and this is what happened with me, but with a lot of people, especially children, going to these type of places makes a huge impact on kids. This is, for many archaeologists, it's this type of thing that got them to where they're at now. It was seeing a place like Cahokia, seeing a place like the Newark Earthworks, like Mound City, Moundville down in Alabama, and all the other places that we've been. It's been key. And a lot of the most prominent archaeologists that we know, that they have this type of interaction at a young age. So, certainly get out there, go see what there is. I mean, all over the country, there's fantastic places that you can go that are within driving distance of your home. And, Cahokia is right across the river from St. Louis. So, I mean, think how many people live in St. Louis. And I've heard time and time again that people live their whole life there and still don't really have any idea what Cahokia actually is.
Right. Yeah,
and that's a shame.
It is.
Hey, folks, but before we go any further, I just wanted to let everybody know they're also live streaming on YouTube, and we actually have. I was just on our YouTube channel, and there's several people on there, and we're kind of having a little chat going, and it's we're having a nice time on there. So jump on, join the chat, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot about the YouTube chat. I tell you, you can't keep up with all of the
I'm
different
telling you, man.
ways, that people are engaging one another these days. Actually, Adam Olson, one of our listeners and longtime supporter, he sent me a very interesting article from the New York Times earlier today, which is asking about whether podcasting has essentially plateaued. Back when I got into this, we started the Seven Ages audio journal only about a year and a half ago. Hard to believe it's been that long ago, but I got into podcasting after working in radio for about 6 years, terrestrial radio, iHeartMedia. At that time, it was still Clear Channel. And, I got bitten by the podcast bug just because I love microphones. And I love, the audio processing side of what we do. And, and plus I'm also just an old news guy. I love old radio. You can see everything in my studio is indicative of old time radio and, Americana culture, all these kinds of things. And, well, at least the side that folks at home were able to see, when you look at the actual technical end of things, and I just shared an image in the messenger chat privately with the Seven Ages guys so they can see the monstrosity, the Lovecraftian lore that is personified in all the equipment over here on my end of things. It's getting to look a little like the Batcave in here.
It's the angles. The angles. So,
well, yeah, it's non-Euclidean geometry, Jim.
Non-Euclidean geometry.
But now,
hey, listen. One of our. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. See, I told you folks that the geosynchronous satellites sometimes have a bit of a breakdown, and that delay can be up to 2 seconds. We're seeing that in effect right now. But what I was going to say is that this New York Times piece was asking, has podcasting plateaued? And that's the interesting thing, because if you go back in time, I said this to Adam in our email exchange earlier. I said, well, I'm sure that, when we create books, people are like, well, now nobody's going to want to talk. Everybody's going to have their nose inside one of these things and they're going to be reading. And then after newspapers come out, everybody's like, well, nobody's going to be reading books. And actually, let's make sure we don't get the timelines mixed up, because really, actually, these two forms of publication, print publications, probably were more or less synchronous in their presentation. But skipping ahead, radio comes along, and then, well, nobody's going to read the papers and the books. Television comes along. Well, radio's dead, ladies and gents. This is the way of the future. The internet comes along. Nobody's going to watch television. Podcasts come along. Well, this is the new thing. Now everybody's trying to say essentially that podcasts are dead, and yet there's not really this successor in terms of media. And if there were one, I would argue that it is this. Live streaming and the availability of live streaming via the World Wide Web and sites like YouTube, that is really the game changer. But again, I think that like radio, like television, like Netflix and online streaming, where television kind of combines with streaming services and it becomes one with the World Wide Web, I don't think podcasts are going away. I think they are evolving, and this is another formation that we're seeing of that.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, and that reminds me of I'm a child of the '80s and somewhat of the early '80s, and reminds me of that song "Video Killed the Radio Star."
Sure.
Well, it really didn't. It just evolved. Is really what happened. So, we still have radio stars. People have, there's still music videos, and we have all of this stuff, and it just becomes more robust, and we get more depth, and as technology increases, we find new ways to reach our audiences and to share information, and I think it just gets better over time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thinking along this line, I will say this, as media and entertainment and various things are moving forward, one thing I think got killed off too quickly. Again, this is throwing back to that child of the '80s thing. But as we're watching shows like Stranger Things, things like that, I get reminiscent of that time period in my life, '80s, '90s. And something that I think that they killed off too quick was my weekend ritual of Blockbuster Video. So, when they did that, they just didn't get rid of a type of entertainment. That was a ritual, folks. And so for you younger listeners who may not understand what we're talking about, come Friday, Saturday night, you were on a timeline, right? You had to get there before everybody else so that you could get the new releases, video games, movies, and, it was like pizza and Blockbuster Video. And that was like a family tradition. You would go there and you'd pick out your movies and your entertainment. And that's it was an experience where now you can just dial it up on your TV, and that's nice and convenient, but it almost doesn't have the feel, that game, that pursuit of trying to get the movie before everybody else and all that type of thing. You felt like you accomplished something when you got home to watch it. So, reminiscing, I've been watching the new season of Stranger Things and just seeing the technologies and the marketing and the merchandise that they do so well in that show of representing from that time period. It just makes you, it really takes you back. And, there's little things in that show that you forget about that really bring back memories. Something as simple as like a Cool Ranch Doritos original bag from 1988, this little things like that. And you're like, oh yeah, man, I remember that. My brother used to buy those. And, it starts you thinking about how quickly all of this is moving. And sometimes I think we get a little bit ahead of ourselves, phasing out old technology and replacing it with the new. And it's, it happened a million times even since then. You remember when everybody had an iPod, right, guys? That was like the hot thing. You got to go get the new iPod. And, now that's just integrated into your phone. Your camera is now integrated into your device. It's not even just a phone anymore. Like Mike always says, it's a multifunctional device. It does many, many things. And I would say that the phone portion is probably the least used part of our devices that we have today. But it's an evolution that we're in right now, and we're moving through it. And it's just one of those things in life that we have to learn to adapt and overcome, if you will. Some things we miss and some things are great. You just kind of make the best of the new world that we live in.
Absolutely. I'll remind our friends in the archaeological community, anthropology community who are listening at home, who I'm sure actually pick up on this. This maybe is more for people out there who are not specific to that field. But if this doesn't sound like discussion of archaeological matters, it has everything to do with archaeology, especially in the sense that although we're dealing with perishable technologies today and we're seeing technological growth at a nearly greater than exponential rate. Some would contend that it's already at that point. And that really, in fact, actually, I interviewed a guy named Samuel Arbison some time ago, and he wrote a book called Complicated. And the premise of this book was essentially that with all of the complexity that goes into information systems, both on the hardware and on the software side of things, there's no such thing any longer as a person who is an expert in a single thing, because all technology of significance these days, well, maybe not all technology, but most technology of significance is a cumulative progression of different technologies leading up to that point. We've got an expert who specializes in the software side of things, someone who, deals with the solid state technology here, or someone who deals with the app, configuration here, or someone who deals with the audio functions here. All of the different disciplines that come together that create a device like an iPhone, a smartphone. It's not one mad scientist sitting down in his laboratory going, what shall I create today? It's a cumulative effort. And in that regard, Arbison's premise was that, things are very complicated, and complicated to the point that nobody is an expert on technology anymore, which makes this a very interesting time, anthropologically speaking, for humankind, because we don't have the kinds of, again, think about the preeminent technology in North America 13,000 years ago. We had a fluted bifacial lithic tongue that had striking similarities to certain types of similar technological advancements that were occurring probably separately, although again, some would argue that there may have been some connections, but again, probably separately in parts of Europe with regard to flaking patterns and things. Someone in North America discovers that flaking pattern style, or actually a combination of different flaking patterns. Jason is really the expert on this as far as this team goes. Overshot flakes and whatnot that are very indicative of what we define. Well, actually, they define the Paleolithic style in North America. But we see that along with a fluted blade, and it makes a highly functional and distinctive kind of weapon. A weapon also that can be, I think tool maybe is a better term, since sometimes these things have multiple functions. They weren't always just weapons. They were sometimes tools used for cutting, used for scraping. Sometimes they had ceremonial significance. But again, in that era, 13,000 years ago, this was the preeminent technological achievement of that era. And one person could become a master of that. And it was a skill that was passed along from one person to the next. What's fascinating is that 13,000 years later, here we are. And now, I could say I'm a master of using a smartphone, but I didn't create this. I don't flint knap this. I don't create this. I don't hew this from actual stone that I retrieve from the ground. I buy this and I pay way too much money for it because I want to be able to have the latest kind. If you wanted the latest kind of Paleolithic type, you learned how to do it, and buddy, you sat down and you made it. And it's incredible, anthropologically speaking, to see the time that we are right now. Again, we look at like the Apollo landings and how we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of those men who put one foot down and took one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, or I should say maybe humankind, more keeping with the times. But they say that there was more technology that went into this device I'm holding in my hand than went into putting men on the moon.
Yeah.
Anthropologically, I'm fascinated with who we are, where we're going, and what technology we now have at our disposal. James?
Yeah, you're very right. And I actually think about this kind of thing at least fairly often. And one of the things that I think about is, individually, what do we really know about the technology we have? And the answer is, it's not very much. I mean, we've got all of this fantastic technology. We've got these phones, we've got televisions, we've got cars, we've got wireless communications of all kinds, we've got satellites, all types of things. But the individual person really has no idea how any of that stuff works. And we couldn't recreate that technology if we had to. So, if we had another, a younger Dryas type event tomorrow, honestly, the average person has actually probably less practical knowledge about how to survive in the world than a Clovis person does. Most people would perish because they have no actual practical skills in survival. And we couldn't recreate this technology. It's like, oh, I can't go to Walmart tomorrow or wherever and buy a new television or whatever it is, or a smartphone. You can't just go home and make it. So we're in a very, a very unique time, I think, in humankind's history. And we're really in a very precarious time because honestly, we're really up on a high wire. So, even the slightest bobble and off we go, it's going to be a catastrophe.
That's a really,
in a lot of
that's a
ways.
good way to put it. The word precarious came to mind too, but I really like the analogy that you used there of the high wire, walking the tightrope. I think
Yeah, we're really on the
it's
tightrope.
a pretty
Yeah.
good way of describing it. Yeah, Jason's the only
Yeah.
one who's going to survive of this group because he knows how to flint.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You still have to be able to hunt, and flint napping is one thing. Catching prey and being able to actually retrieve it is a whole nother game. So hopefully, none of us are faced with that. But stranger things have happened. That's for sure.
What's up with you and Stranger Things, by the way?
I don't know. It's a theme. Could it be because everyone's watching it right now?
I admittedly have been watching it some in the evenings. For me, I of course I'm a blogger or writer, and I do a lot of different things. And also I actually narrate audiobooks, and so I'm using my ocular cavities, maybe more than the average person does at their job, which yet again is a little problematic, especially if you're someone who seems to be prone to eye strain. I used to get eye strain working back in my days in terrestrial radio too. And I tell you, I've actually, speaking of technological developments, I've actually stumbled upon something that is rather technologically remarkable myself. You guys want to see how I've been combating eye strain lately?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. So I went to the local, not really thrift store, but I guess it's just one of those discount, clothing stores where all the good stuff from the big, you know, brands and the department stores and everything, where you're going to go and pay $65 or $85 for a shirt. You can go there and you can get it for like $4.99. Well, I go in there and they sell sunglasses, and I spotted, and they were all smudged up and really gnarly looking and everything when I found them in there. Amazing what a little goo gone to remove all the little sticker, areas where the stickers and the little price tags have been, and then just polish them up. But yeah, they had this pair of the Wayfarers with the coating. Now I've used over the years all different kinds of blue light blocking glasses. I've owned a lot of different ones. In fact, the very first pair that I think I ever bought, I still have right here. But the problem with these is they were designed as reading glasses, and they have magnification in addition to this orange tint, which is supposed to help adjust the contrast and make it more easy on the eyes. And if anything, the magnification of these glasses not only puts you in a position where you have to keep your head a certain distance from the screen, but it also strains your eyes more, because when you take them off, they've got to be able to react to the environment. And so what I did was I spent, I think, $4.99 on these stylish guys right here that you can see have the coating, but which are clear. They're not actual sunglasses. And then I went over there. Here's my Clovis, modern Clovis, post-Clovis modification. I went to Walmart and just picked up a pair of these Night Drive orange. Again, no magnification, but these are UV blocking, blue light blocking. And what you do is you snap these guys on just like that. And all of a sudden I turn into Hunter Thompson. So
Look out.
double coated, double lens. And I'm going to tell you what, they actually work. This is the most effective solution to eye strain that I have found. Now I do look like a mad scientist. It's no joke.
Yeah, you really kind of do.
It's part of that evolution we were talking about.
Well, my eyes are evolving apparently right now.
Yeah.
So the number to call into the program if you'd like to join us tonight is 828-398-4886. You can also text us at 828-367-7201. If you'd like to join the program in the chat room, keep up to date with what's going on, you can chat with us right there in the YouTube window, or head on over to 7ages.org, where we have our exclusive chat. right there. Just click on the main link there on the 7ages.org page, which of course is titled 7 Ages Audio Journal Live, and today's date, which is July 18th, 2019. Scroll down the page, you'll see the YouTube video embed. You can actually watch the program right there. And additionally, you can join the live chat. I'd like to go to the phone lines right now. We've got a caller coming in from area code 256. Welcome to the program. Who's with us?
Hello, hello, hello. How in the world are you, gentlemen?
Well, I know that voice. I know that voice anywhere. That's the one and only, the legendary Mr. Lash Laroux, my friend and brother. How you doing?
Gentlemen, somebody had to be, and I drew the short straw. It is me. It is me. It is that RC Raging Cage.
Brother, how you doing down there, man? Hey, first and foremost, I want to ask, I hope that the other thing that's been raging down there off the coast, Barry, hasn't been affecting you down there in the bayou.
It did not, man. Fortunately enough, it kind of did this weird curve around us and went both to the west and to the north of me simultaneously. So I did not get much of that at all. It kind of dinked and dove and moved around me.
Yeah. Well, you are lucky. You are lucky indeed. And we've got a lot of calls coming in, of course. So just if you don't get in right away, because we got to talk to Lash for a little while, just call in once you actually hear the phone lines open up. Lash, man, I tell you, I'm just glad that you guys are down there, because the thing about the trees in the Laroux Bayou is, I know the roots go deep, but if they get waterlogged, those trees can fall over. And I remember the last time the guys and I had to paddle in there to get you out, of course he'd already found his way out. We get there and the Laroux household is empty, and he's in his retreat, over there basking in the sun, hanging out. Hey, what are you guys doing over there? So, but anyway, we tried to help. That's what happens when you try to help a superhero like Lash Laroux. Hey, you know what? The Avengers had their Hulk. We've got our Lash. So back off.
Hey, just lean and mean and full of steam.
That's true, man. And that shocking red hair, which is reminiscent of the very magicians of the gods. Have you caught Graham Hancock's new book, by the way, America Before, which I'm sure we'll be discussing some tonight?
I have not, and I totally need to, man. I so deeply want to dive into that, and just I got to get a better handle on it, because I find it more and more difficult to follow you guys week in and week out. You're so far ahead of the curve on everything that the moment I try to play catch up, I turn around, you're on to something else, and I go, man, I just admire these guys so deeply. I'm just now catching up to the pirates that you guys talked about a couple of weeks ago.
We should go. We should go be pirates for a weekend. Can we do that?
Hey, we could be bayou pirates. Swamp.
Yeah. No, that's a whole different breed of pirate there. Now you got to have some training for that. You can't just go in the swamp and be a pirate without some training.
Yeah, I mean my pirate training wheels for that one.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, I want to mention
it's all fun and games so you get an eye patch.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of a sad story. Actually, I heard a story from a pirate one time, and Lash, I may have told you this story. There was a fella who, and this probably was, back around the turn of the last century when there were still pirates. And fella walks up onto a pier and he sees him standing there. He's got, the parakeet on his shoulder and everything, and the eye patch, and he goes, "Whoa, you're a pirate." And he says, "Aye, laddie, I am." And he says, "Man, what's it like being a pirate?" And he says, "It's hard work. Very hard work." He says, "How'd you get that parakeet?" And he goes, "Well," he says, I robbed a man and then I killed a man." And the guy's like, "Whoa, you really are a pirate." So they have this conversation. They're having the talk and everything. And he says, "How'd you get that eye patch?" He looks at him wistfully through his one good eye and goes, "A bird pooped in my eye." And he goes, a bird that took your eye out?" And he says, "Well, you see, that was my first day with my hook." Yeah, it was not
all right.
So, what? I thought that was funny.
What have you been up to there, Lash? I know you're a fantastic artist, and you've even contributed some art for this program in the past as well. I know that you're on the road a lot, and you're doing a lot of artwork, even more so than the professional wrestling. And ladies and gents, we know for a fact from firsthand experience that Lash Laroux is a very professional wrestler. He taught us more, I think, in 45 minutes about the art of pro wrestling than I'd ever known in my entire life. but now he's an artist, a very talented artist, and you do a lot of different stuff. So Lash, what have you been up to?
Man, more than anything at all, I've been doing a lot of caricature work lately, and traveling a lot doing that. I've been back and forth. A hotbed for me recently has been Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they had a River festival not too long ago that I was a part of, their River Bend Festival, and now they'll do River Walk nights coming up in the next few weeks, and starting a week from Saturday night, I'll be up there on Saturday night doing live caricatures. And there was a really cool band. This is a kind of fun story that you guys will probably enjoy, that I met at the last festival that I was at. And they were a band by the name of Rubik's Groove. And they do 90s and 80s cover songs. And they dress up like iconic characters from that era as well. And I didn't realize that at the time. I just met the band, and they were big wrestling fans. And they recognized me, and they said, man, you got to draw our caricature. And I said, yeah, sit down, man, let's do it. And they, wait a second, you got to wait till we get in, get our outfits on, our costumes on for stage. And I said, okay, go right ahead, man. They went, did their deal. They come back. They're in full regalia. And there's a guy that's dressed up like Johnny from the Karate Kid. There's one that's sort of a Pee Wee Herman takeoff, and one that's kind of Teen Wolf, and one that's RoboCop. And I got to draw a caricature of all these guys, and they loved it so much. We put it into a collage and made it a poster for them. And I've been working on that project for the last few weeks, doing full color and a poster design on that. Turned out phenomenal.
Wow. Well, I knew it would turn out phenomenal since you were the artist. And I don't mean that just because you're my buddy, man. You are one talented artist. In fact, I'm always missing messages. And a while back, actually, this may have been like a year ago, Lash sent me a caricature he had done of me. And I'm going through my phone, and I found that. And I still have that. In fact, I want to frame it because it not only is, in my opinion, the very best caricature anybody's ever done of me, but, man, I've always admired people who can just sit down and they can pick up on all the little nuances of a person's face, and they can produce an image like that. And, truly, you're incredibly talented, my man. And that's just one of the things that you do. This guy also, let me keep him. Oh, go ahead. Jump in.
No, I was just going to say thank you. That's all I was going to do is appreciate the compliment.
Yeah, man. This guy took us when the Seven Ages team. Actually, you know what? We were doing some storm chasing last fall when we were down your way, and we go to visit Lash, and he meets us at the Waffle House, which is like so Seven Ages because we always end up at a Waffle House with somebody very interesting. And so there's Lash Laroux, again, former pro wrestler. He's been all over the world, been on television for years, and he's coming and hanging out with us and just talking in a Waffle House. He's like, well, guys, I'll take you down here to the local history museum. And lo and behold, they had this very impressive ancient Egypt display that we were able to go and have this remarkable experience. At one point, Lash, I even had you read the caption that was on there, in your immortal voice, reading these ancient words that were written in Egypt. Gosh, probably 4,000 years ago. I mean, it's incredible to me to have that experience, and the people that we meet, the experiences that we share, the adventures that we have. It's just, that's to me what makes this all so much fun.
Oh, it absolutely is. In fact, it's funny that you put it in those terms too, Micah, because that's the thing that people don't recognize and realize about sort of this brotherhood that we've created, man. That you and Jason and James and all of us coming together. And I think the magic, if there is magic behind what is the Seven Ages podcast, it is the fact that we are having these adventures. You take something that you're passionate about, that you have a deep abiding interest in, and then you bring whatever your life experience and your knowledge is to that table, and then you get to have these wonderful adventures with other people that are like-minded but bring a different skill set. And man, I learned so much from you guys. You guys learn a little something from me in the process, hopefully, and then we all throw this stuff into, if you'll excuse the phrase because I am Cajun, this gumbo that we call the Seven Ages, and it becomes this wonderful adventure for all of us.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. I learned something not only from you about wrestling, I also learned what a wrestling fanatic our good friend Jason Pentrail is, because and I often think about the story of him when he was a kid coming out in the bathrobe and everything.
Yeah. Well, if the audience hasn't figured it out by now, I'm just an 80s, early 90s guy. Whether it's, the guitars, the bands, the culture, the pop culture, everything from that time period. And we discussed it last time. Last time we had one of these live shows, we talked a little bit about that. And it was the time of big hair, big personalities, Ric Flair, all that good stuff. And
Yes.
I just loved it, man. And I don't follow it anymore these days because it's not the same. But hey, would I be telling the truth if I said sometimes at night I'll pull up YouTube and I might be watching, I don't know, a match from 1987? Yeah, that happens. That happens on an occasion.
Yeah.
Slow day at work. Hey, man, Pentrail, what are you watching over there? Don't worry about it. It's just a championship match from 1986. Don't worry
Whatever
about
it is, it's not what you think.
it. Probably not
Macho
what you think.
Man.
Well, hey, Jason, I got one for you, my friend. Along that line, along that vein, you'll love this. A couple of weeks ago, I have been retired now from professional wrestling for almost 10 years. And it's been almost 10 years since I stepped foot into a wrestling ring. The closest I've come to that is when you guys came to town, and I kind of went through some preliminaries there explaining some of the ins and outs of what goes on with the psychology of wrestling. But outside of that, I've really kind of steered clear of it. And I've always been one of those kind of guys that when I said I was retired, I retired. I wasn't going to be the guy that kept going back to the ring and retired for the 42nd time. But a couple of weeks ago, Arn Anderson came to town. They were inducting him into the Alabama Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I hadn't seen Arn in almost 20 years. So I wanted to go by and say hi to him and let him know what an impact he had on me when we were together in WCW and how much he helped me early in my career. And part of him coming to town and being a part of this Hall of Fame event in Alabama was they ran a workshop that morning for a lot of the local wrestlers to learn a little bit more from Arn and get some additional training, some advanced training, if you will, from someone that had been around like Arn had. And so rather than going to the show itself and being around wrestling and an event and that sort of thing, because I didn't want to put myself in the middle of all the fans and make them think that I'm part of the show or anything like that, I still wanted to keep my distance. But I still went and saw Arn while he was there running that private workshop. And of course, I could not help myself to get into the ring and go over some stuff with some of these young guys. And that was the first time I actually stepped in a wrestling ring in almost 10 years. But it felt really good. I felt like I hadn't lost a step, and that little spark, that little magic starts to come back a little bit and those juices start flowing.
Oh, yeah, man. I could imagine. That sounds incredible. Some things you just never forget, like riding a bike, right?
That's exactly like that, guys. And maybe I'm overselling it a little bit, being a little overzealous for you guys, but it's those juices flowing and those endorphins and that adrenaline pumping, much like you guys when you start walking on that dig site and getting in the midst of the soil there with the archaeology. It's amazing to be stuck right in the middle of your passion, and you look around and you say to yourself, man, I get to make a life out of doing this sort of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we'll just take a moment here to say, a big thanks to all the people and all of the archaeological digs and all of the people that we've met over the last couple of years who have allowed us to do that and have trusted us with their sites and trusted us with their information. That speaks volumes, and we certainly appreciate everybody who's allowed us to come out and be a part of what they're doing, and we plan to continue to do that in the future. And Lash, I will be in Chattanooga in October, brother. So I hope to get with you and maybe your wife if she's around. But at least, I want to get with you and have dinner one night, and we'll see if we can make that happen.
Absolutely, man. I would not miss it for the world. We are due for a reunion.
Yeah, that we certainly are. And Lash, I want to thank you, by the way, just for calling into the program here. From time to time, as you know, we do these live shindigs on the air. We should probably do them more often. My wonderful assistant down there, Lauren, who's also been in the merely in the crosshairs, I should say. Fortunately, she wasn't affected by the weather too badly, but she's certainly been out there in that area where the hurricane's been. But she's always saying, you guys need to do more live video. And the more that we do, the more we're able to talk with guys like you, the Raging Cajun, Mr. Lash Laroux, former pro wrestler, official, unofficial, fourth member of the Seven Ages Audio Journal and Research Associates, and again, our good friend and my brother. So thank you as always for calling in, man. And it is truly great to hear from you.
Hey, man, thank you guys for having me. And I won't take up any more of your time, but let me just say very quickly that I think it's important what you guys do here, because you bring such knowledge to the subject while at the same time you're bringing this element of entertainment and excitement that captures people's eyes. They see the passion that you guys have. And so it's no small service that you're displaying and you're putting forward to pull people in, to draw an interest into a deeper dive there, and people study and make knowledge for themselves of all the things that you guys are passionate about. Because I know for me especially, you've brought to my attention things that I never would have went out and been able to find that information on my own. And it's a genuine, wonderful service that you guys are producing, just being what you are with the Seven Ages.
Well, thank you, bud. And that means an awful lot coming from you. We're headed back down to the bayou sooner rather than later. So when we do, be baking them biscuits. I'm going to be hungry, son.
Hey, you gentlemen, come on, and we will let that ball roulette. We'll let the good times roll.
My man, my friend, and my brother, Lash Laroux, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be having him back on the program for a check-in again real soon. And thank you again, my man. You stay safe down there as always. And tell the family and the fine folks out there at the ministry we said hello, okay?
Will do, man. Y'all take care and have a wonderful evening.
We will indeed. Mr. Lash Laroux, the one and only. Again, if you guys would like to call into the program, we would love to hear from you. The ways to reach the program right now are area code 828-398-4886 if you'd like to call using one of those portable multifunction devices we were talking about earlier. Or if you're old school and you'd like to use a landline, you can reach us that way too. Area code 615. We've got you on the call there. Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is David from a Life Nerds podcast. I also have Connor on the line with me too.
David,
Howdy.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Gosh, it's good to hear your voice there. Yeah, we're doing really, really good. In fact, Jason, I think you did a little teaser for these gentlemen on a recent podcast of ours, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So for all the listeners out there, this is two of the three hosts from a brand new archaeological-based podcast called A Life in Ruins. And we have Connor and David, who is a Seven Ages alumni. So if you go back to episode 17 called Of Wolf and Man, we discuss the fascinating topic of ethnocenology with David Ian Howe, who is an archaeologist, and it's a really fascinating episode. We've got a lot of good feedback on that. So welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Sorry to hear. Carlton is currently overseas right now. He's in Ukraine doing some field work, or else he would have joined us on this as well.
Hey, that's the best reason not to be able to be on our live show.
Yeah, that's a really good excuse.
Yeah, I've been seeing the social media updates of his arduous journey over there. It looks like he finally made it, so we're happy that he's there safely.
Yeah.
Well, here's a rare opportunity, guys. We have two other podcast hosts. So your podcast has just really gotten started. What do you guys have? 4 episodes out right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's correct.
Yeah, about 4. And so I've listened to all 4 of them. I was really excited to see that you guys, produced a new podcast, because we all know that, anthropology and archaeology podcasts, there's not a whole lot of them out there. There's a few floating around, but it's always good to see people excited and taking on the challenge of a podcast. So tell us about it. How's it going so far? Like, introduce it for the listeners so they have an idea of what to expect from A Life in Ruins.
Connor, you want to take that one? You want me to go?
We can double team this as we're co-hosts together. So our podcast is us 3 archaeologists, kind of interviewing people within the field and discussing how they kind of got into archaeology, where their inspiration was, and what they're doing currently, and then kind of an open, fluid discussion about current topics and current things in anthropology and archaeology that are kind of on their minds. And we're trying to get kind of a variety of folks, our next episode is going to have someone who's a paleontologist, which is not archaeology, of course, but she's an archaeologist by training originally. So we're trying to, and then we've had a rock art person. So we're just kind of trying to do a diversity of subjects within the anthropology and archaeology community.
Well, there's certainly plenty of them to talk about, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah,
say again? I'm so sorry.
I said there's
Couldn't
certainly plenty of them to talk about, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we were talking about. Like, you guys, I think, do like a wonderful job of doing like the public outreach like aspect of archaeology and anthropology, just science in general. Like, you guys have had some really awesome guests on there, like the pirate episode. Like, I've seen like an episode or two pop up, and I've been like busy at work, and like, I'll get to that later. But the pirate one, I was like, I dropped what I did, and I was like, that's really cool. So I like listened. I loved that one.
Well, Dr. Charlie Ewan he is a superstar. We had an opportunity to meet him down at an event which is close to where he is, East Carolina University. And Dr. Ewan's involved in all different kinds of stuff. You know, one thing that I'd love to talk with him at some point about, which we have not discussed, and again, being from North Carolina, I guess this is near and dear to my heart, but the lost colony. The archaeological effort to try and locate the whereabouts, where they ultimately may have gone, and also to discern whether certain archaeological evidence in relation to the history of this, because again, this is historic archaeology, and that's exactly what Charlie does. He is a historical archaeologist, and yet, again, we have to rely on a lot of traditional archaeological excavation methods to try and glean information about those sites, and that's if we find where they had actually been, among other things. So Charlie is involved in my opinion, some of the most interesting archaeology in North Carolina right now. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, David. He is just a remarkable resource for information on all things having to do. And then we get into talking about piracy with him. Again, those guys, they are, I think, on the cutting edge of that, and bringing in something very similar to what we talked about recently with Jesse Halligan, of course, who was down there at the Page Ladson site and famously retrieved that cutting implement from that location. So I guess over the last couple of episodes, we've been getting into underwater archaeology. Have either of you guys taken the plunge yet and started doing that?
No, just water screening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, it's one of those areas that a lot of people don't know about, and that's one of our core values and goals is to bring parts of archaeology, subjects that maybe people aren't as familiar with. We're going to continue to branch out into some other subjects as we move forward, but it's been an adventure so far, and
Hello?
I think we
go ahead.
I'm back now. You can hear you guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we must have lost you there for a second.
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Technology is imperfect at best. Let's see if we've still got them. Gentlemen, can you
What do
hear
we
us?
do now?
Yeah, we may have lost you. I tell you what, guys, if you get a chance, try calling back in. We'll see if we can get you back in on the call there. In fact, I may just try and initiate that call one more time from my end. Sometimes, ladies and gents, that does happen. You do lose these calls.
So that's live broadcasting for you there. So while we're in the midst of calling them back, there's a couple of folks on the YouTube chat actually that have some questions, and one is John Lowe. He's asked us to talk about the Younger Dryas impact tonight, which I promised him we would probably get to at some point. And then Caleb Welch has asked if we'll be attending the Southeastern Archaeological Conference in Jackson, Mississippi this November.
Really quickly, and we got the guys back on the line. We should probably try and get down to that event in Jackson, Mississippi for a number of reasons. But as far as the Younger Dryas, I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion about that later, and we certainly will get to that. If anyone has ideas they'd like to share, again, just pass them along there in the YouTube chat or in the chat window that we have right there at 7ages.org. Or, of course, you can call in. I'd like to get back to our guests here. David, have we got you guys back?
I'm back at least. Connor,
yeah, I'm here as well.
Okay,
Sorry,
yeah.
Little technical difficulties.
They happen from time to time. That's okay, guys. So pick up where we left off there. Sorry about that.
I don't remember exactly where we were, but I was going to mention you guys went to Topper and talked to Shane.
Yeah.
I recently had one podcast. I don't know if you guys knew this. Shane was my field school director And I started my archaeological career in that little picnic shelter right there. That was a cool episode for me.
Boy, so I'm sure you could tell the episode that we did was right there in the picnic shelter. I got to tell you, Shane was one of the best guests I feel like we've had in a long time. That was a very special experience. James, I wish you could have been there because we're sitting there at the table. There are the grad students all around, and we're talking with Shane, and he said, "Hey guys, this is my first podcast, and let me just tell you, if for those at home who don't know Dr. Shane Miller at Mississippi State, he's cool. He's very cool." And it didn't sound like it was his first podcast. He was, in my opinion, one of my favorite guests. But the first, we'd met him a year ago down there at Topper. Al Goodyear took us out there to Topper, and we spent a whole day with Dr. Goodyear traveling all over South Carolina, but going to Topper, filming and producing the documentary that we did there. And gosh, there's nothing like that. And although we've been to Topper,
it's a cool site. Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. It's controversial, and I get it. And, and Shane has his own ideas about some of the things about, possible, redeposition as a result of course, the fact that we've got the alluvial plain right there, and being close to a river. That's always a question. That's always going to, I think, remain in question until we have more, perfect scientific ways that we can determine these kinds of things. But for the time being, no one would dispute that Topper is an enigma. Anyhow, we go down there. We met Shane. He was extremely nice. And then this dig season, he invites us, well, come back out, come down to Swag. So Jason and I went down there and we camped. And I got to tell you, man, not only is Shane cool, and Jason can attest to this. When we met him, I'm letting the complete cat out of the bag here. We went and got in my car, and I looked at Jason and I said, that is one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. His perspectives on archaeology are just different from anybody I've worked with. And I think it's because he is both a young cat, he's like our age, but he is so well versed in the last several decades of archaeological progression. And you learn so much when you were with Dr. Miller. He is just incredible. And I think, frankly, he contributes a lot more even than he realizes. He is impressive. So yeah, that's so cool that you guys studied with him right there.
Yeah, I owe him my career. That's an understatement for sure. But we also text Game of Thrones theories back and forth to each other all year.
Yeah. So, well, what else have you guys been getting into on the podcast? What's your most recent episode about?
Connor, you want to hit that? Oh, sorry, my dog's squeaking a toy right here.
That's okay. See, ethnosynology at work right here, ladies and gents.
Yeah, he's active. Always when I'm on the phone. It's great.
Yeah, Strider, right?
So
Yeah, I believe it is Strider.
Yeah, Strider, right? I was gonna say Strider's more popular than any of us.
Yeah. A lot about him. I think, Connor, you were going to jump in there. Yeah. So what's your latest episode about?
So our latest episode, the one that's out, was about tattooing with a guy. Did you guys do a thing with Aaron as well?
We did. Aaron
Dieter Wolf. Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah, he's a hell of a guy, and that's a super interesting topic within archaeology. So we talked about tattooing and kind of what he does in his regular life, and it was this kind of wide-ranging, super interesting, super funny, kind of interesting guy. I mean, I think looking in tattooing archaeological record is a super interesting topic, and kind of hints at this you guys mentioned earlier, this diversity of things that people study.
Oh, absolutely. What are your thoughts on Otzi the Iceman after talking with Aaron?
I think he did something nefarious and got off. That's my theory that I've always.
Yeah. Well, it does seem like he was moving away from something rather quickly.
Well, he has something in common with another enigmatic discovery from the ancient past here on the North American side of things, Jason, that we were talking about recently, and that is the Kennewick man. He had an actual, lithic biface lodged in his body when they recovered his remains, if I remember correctly. Isn't that right? Otzi, I think, actually had.
Yeah.
He'd been shot.
Yeah.
Otzi was shot in the his lower back, if I believe correctly.
Yeah. And so some had interpreted, again, similar with the hip shot that the Kennewick man had sustained. And so make of that what you will. I mean, again, in hindsight, trying to interpret archaeologically what that means and to try and derive some kind of narrative from that, that's always difficult to do. I get it. And sometimes I actually would hazard And rather, I would argue that it's better not to speculate too much.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
Jason and I, and actually what it was Jason had discovered in some writings a number of years ago in one of the early publications made about the Galt site, he had discovered what looked like a redstone. Again, a southeastern point type, also identified as what's known as a gainy if you go a little further north. And then even beyond that, certain types like the
Never heard
Debert
of that.
are, yeah, they're similar to that as well. This thing shows up. It's not in the Paleo-Indian database. It's down there at the Galt assemblage. It's in the Clovis stratum layer. Jason reaches out to Dr. Michael Waters, and he writes back and goes, guys, it is what it is, you know? But I understand why he said that.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. But, you know, the rare finds like Otzi and, you know, guests like Aaron Dieter Wolf, again, I think, you know, I think our podcasts are going to probably cross a lot of similarities because we're all from sort of different generations and we're all on the younger side of things. You guys even more so than us, but we're bringing, I think, fresh topics to the world of archaeology that aren't discussed as much. You know, just like with your research, David, and what Aaron's doing with ancient tattooing, which is absolutely fascinating. And, you know, again, you know, you guys mentioned it on your podcast and with him, and we also mentioned it on ours, that how important is something like tattooing to these cultures. And it seems that nearly all of these ancient cultures at some degree were using tattooing. So it was an intricate part of daily life. And, you know, we can speculate about it, but it probably signified all sorts of things, from status to prowess to warrior class, shaman class, all sorts of different things that it could have been used for. But yet it was largely ignored by most academics for the majority of the time that we've been studying such things. So it's due way past due time that we give it the attention that it needs. And I think, you know, Aaron's doing some highly commendable work in that particular area because I don't see a whole lot of other people doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like it's just something you don't think about. Like you have all those like bone awls and like the needles and things that you would think it was for some other kind of, you know, hide processing or something like that. But no, it like might have been used for tattooing too. And it's a great thing that he's looking into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's cool to see something that we can kind of think about as just less utilitarian and mostly cultural. I mean, you could say that, you know, bifaces and, you know, points and all that stuff, but there's an element of culture into that. But, you know, tattooing, I think, is something, you know, which can be utilitarian, but it's also something that's super cultural and, you know, is kind of focused in that area, which we don't see much in the archaeological record, especially, or we don't study it that way. You know, I think it's super interesting stuff.
It really is. How do we get to a point where we do study it, where we change our mindset around to taking that kind of an approach? Because I'm with you. I think sometimes that we're looking at things in a very two-dimensional way. And there's maybe a depth in terms of the knowledge we could glean if we could change our attitude toward the way that we look at some of these things. How do we get to that point, do you think?
I mean, I've always thought like there's no way you're going to see like everything at an archaeological site, obviously, but like things, if you go in it with a processual mindset and just kind of pick, like, you know, document everything that's there and collect everything, and any kind of tools you find, you'd have to do some kind of residue analysis on all of them in order to find like that one had human blood or that one had canid blood on it and stuff. And then from there, you can deduce like, okay, well, these people had dogs maybe, or they had tattooing implements. And like, if you're not doing that kind of analysis, you might just consider them tools, put them in a bag, and then they get curated, and it just doesn't get looked at.
Right.
It requires a lot of money.
Yeah,
absolutely. When I think I think there might be certain things that are more easy to study culture with, and I think tattooing is an example of that. You know, I think, but maybe there's different forms of research, like David was mentioning. Just, you know, throw money at the wall, and if it sticks.
I hope that, you know, that there could be more interest, you know, generated in terms of academic funding for this kind of research, because again, well, we coming back to Otzi the Iceman, that's the reason we bring him up. I mean, with all the things that we learn about Otzi, he's got these very strategic placements of different kinds of tattoos on his body. This is a rare circumstance, of course, where we have a remarkably well-preserved, you know, set of human remains, frozen in ice and preserved. Of course, it doesn't look like he fell down there yesterday, but conceivably, though the state of the remains and the lack of decay, again, might have been comparable to a body who, under other circumstances, had been there only a few months. We're looking at thousands of years, and to have that kind of a rare glimpse back in time, not just with the tattooing, we're talking about the clothing. We're talking about any kind of fibrous materials that are on his person, the parasites in his gut and his intestine. I mean, we have all of this information about the lifestyle of this individual. You don't get that's a once in a lifetime kind of an experience. But when those come along, it's absolutely imperative in terms of the furtherance of archaeological knowledge that we look at it, like you said, in a processual way, where we go in there with that mindset and we say, let's gain as much information as we can. We may not find that little iota we were looking for decades, but somebody will be going back through that data and go, hold on, what's this? And maybe with new data and new information and new technological developments forthcoming in the next few decades. Again, think about like 30, 40 years ago. Had we had blood protein analysis back then, imagine all the different kind of things we could do. Or optically stimulated luminescence dating. Yeah, these kinds of technologies are making sites datable. We can now trace and we can now discern aspects of the usage of tools, what they were used for, how they were used, what they were used to kill, to butcher, etc. At some point, now what's really going to be weird is if we can reconstitute particulates from what were once wood fixtures that were used thousands of years ago, perishable technologies. Wait till we can do that,
Oh man.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All game for that.
So, well, what's next for you guys on the podcast? Where are you guys headed next in space and time?
Well, when Carson makes it back from the wilds of Chernobyl, we'll decide on our next episode. But I think, the dinosaur episode with Amy Atwater comes out in August, I think 10th, August 9th, something like that. And then after that, we're not sure, but we'd love to have you guys on there. We can talk podcasting at some point, or just outreach and archaeology in general.
We'd love to. In fact, anytime. Please, we're always happy to jump on with you guys. We support what you're doing. We appreciate you guys, and of course, David, having been on the show with us in the past. But that goes to both you guys, the entire crew, in fact. And let's make that a reciprocal relationship. We'd like to get you back on again, and just keep it going, because as we were talking about earlier with regard to what's happening with podcasting right now. Whoa. Goodness gracious! I had to guess that moving his computer.
Sorry.
Good
Sorry,
job,
man. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I'm just like fidgeting with things and moving my computer around. I've got this really like awkward setup. I've got the little hotel table. I've got my bag on top of the table to give the laptop a little bit of height. And then I'm sitting here looking at my own face, and I'm just like, this is just not right. I've just got to get this figured out. I didn't mean to alarm the natives, though. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I think about that when I look at my face too, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you said, let's keep the conversation going, guys, because that's the reason we started our podcast. That's why we're so happy to see you guys doing this. Let's provide in a semi-permanent medium where these conversations can be recorded for posterity. People can access them who may not be in the academic field. I mean, I'm not in the archaeological field. I'm just very passionate about it, and I support the work that guys, professionals like you do. Let's keep this conversation going. I'm really looking forward to talking more with you, and thank you for the work that you're doing right now.
Thank you for the inspiration to get into podcasting. We really appreciate you guys, and keep doing the good work.
We will indeed. All right, guys. Good night.
Yeah, take it easy.
And good luck.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Really good to hear
right,
fellow podcasters. Again, David had joined us. David is, part of his focus, obviously, he's a very well-rounded archaeologist, but again, he has been working in this burgeoning field of ethnosynology. Syn, S-Y-N, C-Y-N, the prefix for, I guess, what you might, in various languages, called the prefix, the archaic prefix, meaning dog.
Yeah.
So we're talking
canine.
Canine, yeah. And we're talking about the archaeological evidence for relationships between humans and canines over time, which is incredibly important because animal domestication is something that is, I think, I wouldn't say it's often overlooked, but it's often something that is very telling about the level of sophistication and aptitudes of any given culture. For example, we recently discussing, and we haven't released this podcast yet, but Dr. Bruce Bradley, who is an expert on European Paleolithic cultures, we were talking with him about the Solutrean cultures. And again, existing maybe 15 to 20, maybe as much as 22,000 years ago, by some estimates, in parts of modern day Spain and France. And one name for those for this culture many decades ago had been the wind horse people, because there was some evidence of horse domestication among this culture. Similarly, and this is unconfirmed, but there are some hints of horse domestication that are now coming out of sites like, wait for it, guys, Denisova Cave. And again, I personally see that as being a little more speculative, but nonetheless, there is some evidence that horses were present at Denisova Cave. And so that bodes the question. I mean, did these ancient extinct Homo ancestors, Denisovans, perhaps even Neanderthal, what was their relationship with animal species? And were they domesticating certain animals as well? I suspect it's not crazy to think that they did, and that these are aspects that, again, archaeologically speaking, we don't have a whole lot of evidence for, but that with time we're going to learn more and more about, and eventually we're going to have to reshape our conception of what we think the past was like and what the people in that ancient epoch were actually doing.
Yeah, maybe they just ate them.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
they were
there's
food crop.
That's
yeah,
possible.
there's so many ways that we sort of imprint our modern society onto the past, and uh, a lot of times we're unable to even imagine the possibilities of what life may have been like, what certain circumstances may have drove people to do adaptations for them to make to adjust to a changing world. I mean, you think about the end of the Pleistocene, how much things were changing at that time period. There's no telling what cultures were doing to have to make those adjustments on the fly. Now, of course, it didn't necessarily happen uh, immediately, unless we're talking about like the Younger Dryas impact event, something like that, where there's an immediate change to daily life. But on average, these things happen over hundreds, even thousands of years. But even still, you're making those constant changes and adaptations for different areas that you might be migrating into. And we talk about a lot of things on here, and then years later we find out that, oh, well, now there's evidence to show that there was some type of domestication, or they were eating something that we didn't think they were eating at that time. Or like with the Wendover Bog people, hey, they had advanced weaving, they had materials that we had no idea they had that many years ago. So there's constantly reevaluation and looking at the information that were given in little tiny pieces, and that's the puzzle of archaeology. That's trying to put together the overall picture from basically people's trash and from what's left of their bodies, and that leaves a lot of room for speculation.
Yeah. And you guys have heard me kind of hypothesize about this before, but it's my idea that modern Homo sapiens, given enough time and everything else being equal, will come to the same kinds of adaptations and inventions and manipulations of the environment in much the same way and much the same time frame. If everything kind of stays the same. So, we start out as hunter gatherers, and then we move to agriculture and animal domestication and all of these more advanced things as we come up with these ideas. So I think that's more or less a constant probably in our history.
James, there's some weird debate back and forth about that subject. I say weird just because, I mean, really, what about archaeology isn't weird in the sense that, I mean, you're always going to have differing opinions about things, and we're all trying to study the past, but we don't have people. We don't have, I mean, sometimes we have little more than what technologies aren't perishable to try and discern. Again, it's like putting together pieces of a puzzle. And that's why in our discussion there with David et al., we're talking about this and kind of looking at, these rare instances where we find, a uniquely preserved human body like Otzi the Iceman.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of things you learn about. Actually, one of the most striking things is you see these people and you begin to really take in how similar they are to us today and how little change actually does occur over time. But coming back to again, there's this debate about, again, the idea of could there possibly be more connections between technologies that emerge in different parts of the world simultaneously? Which I guess really kind of goes back to the ever controversial debate over diffusionism, and the sense that, you know, some of these technologies are spread by different people. And you know, for reasons that are well understood, if you look at the history of archaeology, especially in the last 2 centuries, or at very least this past century, and then the final couple of decades of the last one, it's easy to understand why there is an aversion to the idea of diffusionism or hyperdiffusionism. Um, you know, this kind of widespread sharing of knowledge between cultures around the world. It seems more likely, and I think at times undeniable, that, like you were saying, James, technological achievements follow certain paths of efficiency, you might say, where, well,
Certainly.
you know, and again, I think that we could look, that's why it's controversial. I won't get into some of the controversies related to this specifically, but I mentioned, for instance, the Solutreans. Some of the flaking types that you see in their style of stonework, it absolutely shows up in North America a few thousand years later. But does that necessarily mean that there's a connection between those two cultures? It may not. And most,
Right.
the consensus among most archaeologists would be today, at least, that there is not. I'm happy to abide by that based on the current understanding. But nonetheless, to your point, it's equally interesting to me, the idea that, well, what we must be looking at then is people finding similar technological procedures and applications, irrespective of one another, without any kind of influence, you know, any kind of cultural exchanges. People nonetheless find their way to these things, and that by itself is fascinating to me, especially when we're talking about technologies. But for those who would say that it seems unlikely, I would say this: look at, you know, Gottlieb Leipzig and of course Newton, Isaac Newton, simultaneously developing the calculus. There are many instances.
Exactly.
Yeah, there are many instances in history where there are almost simultaneous technological developments that occur, you know, in separate parts of the world. Why? Because there's a need for it, and the human mind working to solve that problem follows this sort of path of least resistance, which leads to innovation. So when people
That
say, "Oh, it's impossible, these technologies couldn't have been shared," I would say, well, actually, yeah, I think it's entirely probable that people in different parts of the world could come to similar technological discoveries without having any kind of actual connection with one another. Even more recent history has shown that.
Yeah, and you know, the things that are, you know, similar among modern humans, I think, is you know, our wonder about our world, right? So, you know, humans have always had this adventurous spirit. I think, you know, modern humans have had that, and then our ancestors, you know, 10, 12, 20,000, 50,000 years ago, probably thought, you know, the same types of things, like, you know, what's over that mountain? What's on the other side of this body of water? What, you know, what's this? How does this work? Well, the only way to find out is, you know, is somebody has to go, and somebody's going to go and explore those things. And the other thing that we like to do is, you know, and we're prone to, is it comes naturally to humans, is solving problems and with a technological sort of a slant. You know, we like to solve problems. So, you know, we're cold. How do we get warm? You know, we're too hot. How do we get cold? We're hungry. How do we eat? You know, these animals are hard to kill. What's a better way? You know, what's a better way to harvest these animals? And, you know, and like the wise man said, necessity is the mother of invention, at least for human beings. So, and that's why I always say, you know, with environmentally, with things being equal, without, you know, without some kind of interference from other people or from environmental factors, you know, whatever it is, that, like I said, oh, somebody's calling in here.
Don't mind. Sorry, I should have had that muted.
You know, well, since our physiology and the way that our brains work and our, you know, our brain structure is not, you know, is not much changed over, you know, tens of thousands of years. I think that those people were able to figure out things that, you know, even we would be able to figure out today, even if we did, like I said earlier, if we didn't have if the lights went out tomorrow and we didn't know how to recreate any of this nice technology that we had, we would still be able to solve some of the problems that we needed to solve in our environment I'm sure we have knowledge of things that they wouldn't have, but we still have to go back and recreate those things.
Certainly.
So, and that's a different thing. It's one thing to know of something. It's another thing to know how to do it or how to apply it or how to use it. I mean, we all know that agriculture grows crops and grows foods, but not everybody knows how to grow those things. So yeah, we got a call. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go to the calls right now. We've got area code 911. Oh, I'm sorry, 912. Let me try that one more time. You're on the line with us. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, it's Chris Cottrell with the Dabbler's Den. How are you?
The Dabbler himself, the avid dabbler. How are you doing there, my man?
Oh, I'm doing great. I the more time that goes by since our weekend out at White Pond, the more fondly I remember that trip. So I appreciate it.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
This guy right here, brother for life, man. We feel the very same about you. And, our good pal George Howard thinks very highly of you. And he wrote in with some very good questions for us and also some support for your work on our recent podcast. And again, it's got me going back and pulling up Google Earth and looking at these famous pock marks throughout the Southeast, these Carolina bays, and looking at them and scratching my head again, So it's such a wonderful time being able to share time with people like yourself who are out there in the field again, doing the yeoman's work. And we couldn't that, and also driving us around that entire weekend. So yeah, man, truly we share.
Yeah, I'm actually right now I'm actually out on Sapelo Island. I spend 1 week out of my summer every year. We've talked before about me being a school teacher, and and I think on our last podcast I think anytime a science teacher can get out in the field and get their hands dirty, that's the way to go. You learn way more by doing that. And so right now I broke away from supper to come talk to you guys, but I'm out here on Sapelo Island doing ecological research, a little bit different from the Carolina Bay stuff. But it's always fun to talk with grad students and professors that are doing ecological work out here on off the coast of Georgia. We've got a lot of good archaeological stuff out here too. So
absolutely.
Yeah, man,
Chris. You and I need to link up since we live so close. We need to get together and drink another beer sometime.
Yeah, we should. You should head over here to Sapelo. They got some really cool archaeological stuff going on here. I went to a seminar just the other day more about Spanish mission work that's going on over here. But there's all kinds of just archaeology going on over here. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool spot.
Yeah, that's cool. Do they have air conditioning is what I want to know.
You got to know the right people over here. It's pretty
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just calling in, guys. I wanted to make sure that we were touching base. I know, like I said, I'd love to meet up with you guys again at some point in the future, and if it's not at White Pond, somewhere else.
Oh, it's a given. It's a given. In fact, guys, I don't know if we formalized our travel plans currently. Although I will say this, I am planning to try and get down to Savannah, that area, sometime fairly soon, because
I hear that we got some beer we got to drink over there, right?
Yeah, that's.
I'm sure that. You guys. Yeah, we'll see if it actually makes it.
That's what I was going to say. I need to talk. I need to talk with you, Chris, and I need to talk with you, Jason, about possibly wanting to join me because our good friend Tim McMillan, who's also down there in Savannah with James, will be leaving the country for a couple of years. He's going to do some official work elsewhere, and I want to catch him before he leaves. And so I've been kind of informally trying to coordinate our schedules so that I can get down there. But I'm like, well, in addition to that, though, I know Chris, you're kind of close to that. James is right there; he lives like a mile from Tim. I've got other friends down there, and it's going to have to happen. So I'll be in touch with you. Hopefully, we can coordinate something because anytime I'm coming down that way, you need to know about it.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, and same if I head up that way too, for sure.
Standing invitation if you ever make it up to the mountains, by the way. Asheville, North Carolina is beautiful, and it's a little cooler here than it is right now down there on the coast.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Well, listen, I sure hope that George's email doesn't get him in trouble. I was excited to hear about that. I hope that it gets you guys to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And maybe dig in a little bit deeper. Because like I said, there's a lot going on right now. And you really got to stay on your game to kind of, keep up with the times with it. So
you've been really busy with that. You and of course Anthony Zamora and a number of other researchers also who are looking again at an entirely alternative hypothesis with regard to the Bay Formation than I guess the conventional model, which would look at this as being a lacustrine kind of a formation. And again, many would have looked at them and said, look, these things are all over the place, their angular orientation. And this again, speaking to your idea, your theory, and the work that you do, the angular orientation is only one aspect of these that makes them highly anomalous. And I don't think anybody would dispute the anomalous nature of these bay formations. Anybody, by the way, at home who's never heard about these things, just look up Carolina Bays online. But that's one thing, one of the many things that our geoscientist friend Chris Cottrell is involved with. He's involved in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Like I said, right now I'm having a great time on Sapelo, just re-educating myself. So
yeah, what exactly is it in there right now?
It's a long-term ecological project that happens here on Sapelo Island, where we get together. It's a group of teachers that get together every summer, and we get paired up with different scientists from different universities: University of Florida, University of Illinois, University of Houston, and whatever they have to be working on, we come down here and we lend them a hand. And I'm always amazed at how mutual the respect ends up being at the end of the week. I always feel like I'm going to be in the way, and when I come out here and I'm actually helping out, I'm always amazed at how the professors and the grad students and the PhD students really appreciate having just somebody there, even if it's just to stand there with a notepad and collect data for them. It helps them speed up the process, and they're like super appreciative of us coming out here and doing this. So it's something I've been doing for 3 years now, and I definitely plan on making it a long-term thing. And just being part of that process has really helped with my own process with Carolina Bays, and understanding, how the professors and the PhD candidates and how they operate and how they get their stuff done. And it's really helped with my own process of trying to get this stuff figured out with the Carolina Bays. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jason, did you want to jump in there, by the way?
Yeah, well, Chris, I just wanted you to, before you hop off, just let everybody know where they can find your work, because, like I said on the last podcast, you've been really working hard, putting a lot of time and effort into it. So just let them know where that's available.
Yeah, they can go look up my. I've got over 20 or 30 videos now directly related to Carolina Bays, and really the direction I'm trying to take it now is the after effects of an event that would have happened, 13,000 years ago, with a bunch of ice falling onto the east coast of the United States and really everywhere in this portion of the country. And they can find me on YouTube at Dabbler's Den. And they can reach me by email at dabblers.den@gmail.com. I'm pretty accessible, so
yeah, absolutely, and extremely helpful for us. Again, when he comes out in the field with us folks, I just hope I'm not the one getting in the way. Coming back to your point, man, we've had that same wonderful experience out in the field. We go out there, we want to be on the job. We want to be documenting what's going on. We don't want to get in everybody's way. The reception from the archaeological and the geological and even the paleontological community has been just exceptional. They're wonderful people. Yeah. And of all the wonderful people we meet, man, you're right there on that list too, Chris. Brother for life, man. And thank you so much for taking time while on the job to call into the program.
All right. Thanks, guys. I got to get back to entertaining, so I'll talk to y'all later.
You take care, man. We'll see you
brother.
later. Good night. Great guy right there.
Hey, while we're in a break here, between calls, I want to do the ritual pouring of the next beer.
Okay.
So, because I'm very thirsty, I turned the air off in my room. It was too noisy.
Archaeologists love ritual, so.
Yeah. So.
They do. That's true. They absolutely.
I'm actually going to pour this on my head now because it's very hot in this room.
Well, yeah.
When you can't figure out what it is, it's ritual.
That's
This is a religious ceremony that I'm doing here.
That's absolutely true. I wanted to bring up something from the chat over on YouTube. I'm monitoring again when you're. I don't know if you guys can tell, but you get. Well, actually, I'll just give a brief perspective here. I probably shouldn't do this because something always breaks, but you can kind of see the setup we have here with all the gear all over the place. And so right here, Master Control, yes, I am indeed producing this program as well as co-hosting with you gentlemen. And so with everything going on, I'm trying to keep tabs on what's happening over here in our chat rooms. And my good pal Rune Erickson over in the Land and Ice and Snow, okay, just to show that we have a completely international audience, Rune put something really interesting here in the chat. He'd mentioned now that wild chimpanzees have started fishing with spears, maybe we will see how early man might have evolved. Have you seen the photographs that show chimpanzees fishing with spears?
Yeah, I have indeed. And I just saw that recently. And from what I understand from the article, it's them imitating local fishermen and hunters and fishermen from the area. So they've essentially seen someone else doing something, and now they're figuring out how to do it on their own, which is remarkable. I mean, because that shows so many thought skills and the ability to contemplate and problem solve and all the critical thinking. So that's incredible. And speaking of Norway, quickly, I just want to say that um, that is by far the most beautiful country I've ever visited. I've been all over the world, but Norway is absolutely gorgeous. So I highly suggest that anybody has an opportunity to go there should absolutely do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just now getting back to the other chat here. We've got Dr. Christopher Moore in our chat room. Also, Christina Frawley, who I should mention. Christina Frawley, this is in the chat there at 7ages.org for those who are following the program there. Others are probably following us just via our YouTube channel. Of course, there are a variety of ways that you can reach us. I'll give you those in just a moment, but I did want to mention Christina Frawley because she is one of our supporters who pledges monthly support to the 7 Ages Research Associates. And of course, you can do that. If you're there at the website, you'll see right there on the right-hand side of the page, there's a little button that says support our work, and there's a big PayPal button. And you can click that if you would like to make a one-time pledge of a show of support, a donation to us. Now, let me tell you what that goes toward. We aren't just lining our pockets, and I can certainly tell you we don't make a whole lot of money doing this. We spend a lot more than we actually make. But what that goes toward is lodging when we're out there in the field, documenting archaeological sites. We spent a lot of time with, again, Dr. Christopher Moore, who we saw there in the chat room just now, who's offering some feedback. And maybe we can hear from him a little later. Who knows? I don't want to put him on the spot, but it's always wonderful to hear from Dr. Chris Moore, who I really kind of think of as a mentor in addition to being a friend in this field. But again, when we're down there on the site with Dr. Moore or with other friends of ours in Southeastern archaeology or elsewhere, there's the travel expense, gas, food, lodging, all these kinds of things. We were able to produce a great documentary. I really think that, and I think maybe it's the thing we're the most proud of at this moment, the documentary on the Topper site. And this, again, along the Savannah River, I remember the mystical quality in this sense. And actually, a lot of our friends in archaeology weren't against seeing things mystically in archaeology. What I mean by that, let me clarify. Again, Jason and I, we wanted so badly to go to this site where the conjecture was that, again, we may be looking at an early human presence, 20,000, maybe 50,000 years ago. And I remember those long drives, Jason, you and I, between your house and going up to the University of South Carolina to visit Dr. James, I think, is making another cocktail over there in the background, by the way. But our long drives up there to the, I should show him how to mute his oh, he's back. Hey, James.
I'm back. Sorry, I was changing the lamps. Sorry.
Yeah, we noticed.
Trying to get the lighting just right.
We noticed, geologist. No, you're welcome, by the way, Christina, who's back in the chat there for us. Again, your support means the world to us. And again, to further elaborate on that point, Jason and I driving back and forth to USC and talking about how excited we were just beginning to get involved. The fact that someone like Dr. Albert Goodyear would even give us enough of his time, an hour or two, a walk across campus to go buy a coffee, to talk about these things that we're so passionate about. And then later, again, maybe a year later, jumping in a car with us, driving out to the Topper site, appearing on camera with us and allowing us to make a film that documents the very important archaeological work done by Southeastern archaeologists. We're so blessed to have been able to spend time with him, with Dr. Chris Moore, with so many others. And in the years to come, we want to continue that work. And so again, what our aim, our effort, and our objectives are to try and to offset some of those costs, because inevitably money goes into this kind of work. And unlike our friends in academia, who are able to get grants and funding, we don't have that kind of academic funding. The Seven Ages Research Associates are an independent organization. What we do out of love and out of respect and appreciation for the good work our friends in archaeology does. And so, we're happy to do that. It's, when it becomes a labor of love, we do it because we love it, literally. But it does help offset those costs. And so if you guys show that support in little donations, Christina, that's why it means so much to us. You're aiding in the furtherance of what we hope to do. And we hope to try and put together some more footage we have from the Serpent Mound, in conjunction with our friends up there in Ohio, try and work on putting together more footage that we have about that site and other sites. We want to try and document some sites that, for all we know, actually could be destroyed. Some of the coastal areas in South Carolina, especially, there are archaeological sites in that region that may not be here in just a few years. And we think it's all the more important to be able to get there and document those sites, because preservation of sites in the physical sense is one way they can be preserved. Nature takes its course. It's almost inevitable. There are many ways that we can preserve our knowledge of the past, and that fundamentally is what we try to do here at Seven Ages. So your support goes toward the furtherance not only of our interests and our passions, but preserving this knowledge about where we came from and learning about who we are, where we're from, and maybe also looking ahead where we're going. This is all part of the human experience. So thank you, Christina. Thanks to all you guys who are supporters of our work. I do want to remind you also, if you enjoy this program and you'd like to call in, jump in on the conversation with us, there are several ways you can do that. The phone line is now open, and that number is 828-398-4886. If you would prefer to text us, and I need to jump back over here to the other window and check our text messages, but you can do that also. Text us at 828-367-7201. info@7ages.org is the email address if you would like to reach us that way. Christina does ask in the chat room there, and since we've thanked her for showing support, I think it's only right that we get to her question first. She did ask, are you planning to head to Cahokia Mounds at any point? I've heard you mention it a time or two. We don't have definite plans. We have been trying to work that out because we want to get there. And our good friend Tim McMillan has been there recently. So our hope would be able to go there because of all the Mississippian sites that we have been to. I think that, and actually, Jason, I think you can speak more to this point than I could, but it is arguably the epicenter, really, archaeologically speaking, of the Mississippian complexes during that period in history, and one of the most majestic remaining today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right at the top of the list, Christina. It's something that we do intend to try to get to as soon as possible. Um, and not only that, but there's so many sites surrounding that area, and we basically want to kind of fly in to St. Louis, see Cahokia, rent a car, and then work our way back south toward North Carolina because there's many, many sites to visit along the way. And ideally, that's kind of what we have in mind. We always try to maximize our experience when we do have a chance to go somewhere, and we try to see everything in the region. And often these things turn into pretty epic road trips. So yeah, Cahokia is right at the top of the list, being that we visited so many prominent Mississippian sites recently, from Okmulgee, Etowah, and I've been there several times, as well as Moundville. There's at some point we want to make out to Spiro. So there's lots of things on the list, and we're trying to just check those off. And the Mississippian culture is something I'm very interested in. Paleo cultures. That's really where my heart lies. But I've also become somewhat obsessed in the last year with Mississippian symbology and that whole culture of how we begin to see the rise of ritual and things like that. It's very interesting, and a lot more customs and various ranges of people within a more typical society type atmosphere, if you will. So yeah, that's something that's key. I mean, Cahokia is something that everybody should see. It's something that's very important, and it's definitely on the list. So at the very least, we know we do plan to have an episode about that with some of the experts, speaking on behalf of the Cahokia site at some point in the future as well. But it would be great to be able to do that live from the site rather than just a typical podcast. One more thing I want to, yeah, that would be great. One more thing I'll touch on real quick is we talked about the donations, and obviously that's important. We need money to be able to do these things, and for those of you who have donated and continue to do so, we give our sincerest thanks. So, I mean, I'm just always taken aback that anybody would want to contribute to what we do, and I'm always humbled and very honored by that.
Well,
But one other thing that's very important if you can't contribute monetarily is a simple thing that you can do is rate and review and subscribe. I know we talk about that a lot, but rates and reviews on iTunes and other podcasting apps, that is how the show grows. That's how other people are able to find Seven Ages Audio Journal. And, you know, it's what we need to be able to grow the show. So rates and reviews are extremely important. Subscriptions to things like our YouTube channel, just click that subscribe button, click the notification button so you know when we have a new episode out or new video up. And while we're talking about that, uh, James, can you speak to a little bit about the YouTube station and exactly what it is you're doing over there? Because James, our team geologist and co-host of the podcast, is in charge of the YouTube um, channel. So, James, tell us a little bit about what you do with the YouTube channel.
Okay, yeah. So our YouTube channel is basically sort of a mirror of our podcast. So you know, our podcast goes up on iTunes and all the normal podcatchers, and then I take the audio from the podcast, and I apply. So I basically turn it into a video, and I've got some imagery, some standard imagery that we use, and then I've got the unique imagery that we use for each episode, the cover art, and whatever else we get from the guests or we've got from our site visits, and then I put that up on the YouTube channel. So I don't think we have as many subscribers to the YouTube channel as probably what we have people listen to the actual podcast. But if you do like the show, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe. I'd super appreciate it. I put a lot of time into those, you know, making those videos, and I'm pretty proud of them. I'm not a super savvy media guy, but you know, I've got a little bit of talent at it. So then there's people that do watch those videos, and they make comments, and we appreciate everybody that does that, and I appreciate everybody that subscribes. And I will tell you that our topper video, which is our most popular video, I would say, is over 21,000 views now. So, and of course, I didn't make that video. That's all Micah did all of that, and he's the real talent behind the scenes there on that. But but yeah, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, folks. We could definitely use the help.
Absolutely. I also want to mention on the text message chain coming in, all the ways that you can reach us. Our friends, although we did get a chance to speak to them a little earlier, the boys at A Life in Ruins podcast did write to us and said, just wanted to shout out to you folks for being awesome and doing an awesome podcast. You inspired us, they say, to get into podcasting, and we can't thank you enough. Now that is a compliment. You know, I've been podcasting for 10 years and for a year and a half with you two fellas. And still to this day, there's nothing that tickles me more than other people saying that they got into doing podcasting after listening to something we did. So that means a lot. And you guys keep it up. We're really proud of the work that you guys are doing also. And of course, as always, we hear from you guys out there. I know a lot of you guys, we've got a few folks who are still jumping into the YouTube chat there who we got some new names and people asking questions about different things here, including everything from genomics to the Younger Dryas Impact event. I know that we're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour. I'm okay to keep going a little longer if you guys are. I really don't have
Yeah.
My next interview isn't until tomorrow at 3 p.m., so technically I've got all the time we need.
Well, you know what, Mike, I do have something I want to bring up that I just thought of, and I know you guys don't want to jump in here on this, but I got a message the other day on our Facebook page from a young man that had basically been inspired by our podcast and by the work that we do to get into, I think it was archaeology or anthropology.
Nope.
And
Caleb.
Yeah, I meant to message message him back. I know you guys did. I just been so busy I didn't get back to him. But to me, that's probably the ultimate compliment, to inspire somebody to get into the sciences at all. Because I'm sort of at a loss for words here, but that is not really I guess that's kind of that's pretty much ultimately, I guess, what we would want people to do. You know, we want people to learn and get interested in this type of stuff, not just archaeology, but just science in general, culture and history and all these things that we do. But, you know, but for somebody, I mean, that's a life choice based on the work that we've been doing. So,
yeah,
you know, thanks for the message. You know, that's awesome, man. I'm pretty floored by that, honestly.
Yeah, his name's Charles, and we will read that entirety on the next episode, I do believe. But we want to save that one for the next episode coming up because it was so profound and it was something that meant a lot to all three hosts of the show. And so I want to give it, you know, its due diligence. But yeah, I mean, to get a compliment like that is you know, unreal. And so every time, honestly, every time that we're able to be involved with, you know, listeners and professors and universities and, you know, just people out there who have a love of archaeology is something that, you know, how many times, guys, have we been on the road and be like, man, I'm just so honored and I'm so thrilled that people are enjoying what we're doing because we do it because we love it. And so when we get that feedback, it's just what keeps pushing us to do this. And with that, I want to let you guys know I just got a text message on my phone from our brother Chris Corley down in South Carolina.
Oh,
And
Chris.
one of our many Chris's, and he is a full-time firefighter. And unfortunately, they've had some storms roll through down there, and they are very busy tonight. But he wanted to call in and say hi to us. But they are out there doing what they do best, which is serving the community and saving lives. So be safe out there, Chris. We love you, brother. And you know aren't able to call in now, but we'll certainly be in touch with you soon, and that's for sure.
Yeah, so many people tonight, and again, we get so many messages because, again, getting our C names, Chris's, and then of course Caleb, who's also reached out to us, but then Charles, who you mentioned, Jason, who I think James was talking about, and I actually responded to Charles's email the other day, but you'd also messaged him on Facebook. So again, folks, from time to time we get our wires a little crossed because we do get so much feedback from folks, and Charles is actually going to school right out here, Western Carolina. Jason, you and I were just there this past fall when we kicked off our fall field trip because we went out to Jeticola Rock, and actually I've corresponded some with Charles about that. And he's very eager to not only dig more into this enigmatic site because it's, again, a large petroglyph that has a number of enigmatic carvings on it which remain undeciphered. It appears to be a large steatite boulder. And although there is the insinuation that some of it may be fairly recent, then again, there are also some bowl carvings in the lower extremities that were only recently excavated within the last few years, which do seem to suggest a pre-pottery contingency. Now, I don't have data in front of me to be able to confirm this, but I want to give a shout out to our good friend, Dan Newbanks, who provided me with the actual paper, the paper about this by Jack Raneke, who is a renowned archaeologist. He actually wrote the report on Jeticola Rock. So Dan Newbanks, thank you, and much good luck coming your way from the Seven Ages team with your prospective jump into politics. Dan's very involved in his community, doing a lot of things down there. So good on you, man. We support you and what you're up to. And of course, look forward again to being able to work with you and more in the field. But thank you also for helping us track down Mr. Raneke's report on Jeticola Rock. And again, some of the data does suggest that this site may have been in use going back much earlier. And Jason, I think that some of that was evidenced to us during the trip that we made there. I've been there many times over the years, but I've got to say, you and I going there together was different for two reasons. Because one, I've gained so much knowledge, since the last time I'd been out there. But again, you, who I really hold to be an expert in so many different archaeological, facets of archaeology, at different periods, practices that people maintain during these periods. And so going out there to Jeticola Rock with you and seeing it, I came away with a whole different perspective. And you add to that then we jumped in a car and drove an hour or two down to Track Rock Gap. I mean, it was like a day of petroglyphs. That was just fascinating. That was the most exciting petroglyph adventure I've ever had. So again, Charles, I hope you keep us up to date on what you're doing there as you pursue your degree in anthropology at Western Carolina. And thank you again for your support. Jason, I'd like to turn it over to you though, because again, we could talk a little about Judicola rock here, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, it's very unique to the Southeast for one thing. We just don't see that sort of thing really anywhere in the Southeast to that degree. Well, I take that back. There are some cave, petroglyphs and pictographs and different things, but for our area, especially in North Carolina, South Carolina, we don't see hardly anything like that. With Track Rock Gap being the next sort of large site that has that degree of petroglyphs, which is a totally separate thing because I certainly have some thoughts on that as well. Judicola, I think that there's much, much more to that story. I think there's much more in that area, archaeologically speaking. And it's one of those areas that you just kind of need to see for yourself because it's in a very unique location. And the way that ridge wraps around it and it creates that beautiful little valley. I got to say, first of all, it's one of the most beautiful places I've been. That's just really stuck with me. It was a beautiful blue sky that day. It's absolutely breathtaking place. I loved being there. It's got that small creek that runs right beside it, and it's just a beautiful, fantastic place to visit. But I feel like there's much more there to find out. I'm very interested in that ridge line, the way it wraps around. I'm also very interested in the adjacent fields along that creek and river. I think there's uh, great potential for much more archaeological discovery in that area. So, definitely something I want to pursue. We have some interest in that area that we've discussed privately, and hopefully we can, turn that yet another project into a future endeavor for Seven Ages. Turning our attention to Track Rock Gap. Now that is a completely different animal in that um, really the stones have been moved, they've been rearranged, they've been desecrated, they've been destroyed to some degree. They're not in very good shape right now. They're actually being eroded quite quickly, and that whole entire area is just sort of a mishmash of different things going on. Again, I feel that that area is very was probably very intensely occupied over time, and I think there's a lot of archaeology there. But with that road widening project and grading project, I'm sure they did at some point destroy a lot of what was there to discover. Um, I will caution people when they're researching on the Track Rock Gap. There's a lot of fringe theories out there about it. There's a lot of bad information out there about it, and there's a lot of unfounded information out there about that site. So, if you do go down that road of Track Rock Gap, just keep in mind that there's to proceed with caution. There's some very sketchy information, to say the least, pertaining to that. So, as far as that sort of archaeology in the Southeast, it is rare. We just don't have an opportunity to see it as much as you do out west. But track Judicola is something that definitely should be addressed further, and there's much more there to learn of that, I'm certain.
Yeah, yeah. A lot. Again, we reference Ranicki's report. Maybe there's actually more that could even be written about that site, and that's certainly something we'd like to get into. Jason, you mentioned the creeks right around that area, and this is something our good friend avocationalist Chris Corley is involved with. Again, as a licensed hobby diver, which is something that all the members of Seven Ages have been involved with in the past. And Dr. Moore, actually, over at sevenages.org in our chat room here, has actually mentioned that Chris is helping out to analyze the artifacts recovered at White Pond over the last few years, and he thanks him. So that's really great to hear because, we talked about this at lunch the first day that I think you'd met Chris before. I had not. He came out and we were able to actually meet him for the first time when we were giving a talk, Jason, you and I, at the Southeastern Archaeological Society conference back in February. And we went and had lunch with Dr. Moore and his family. And Chris came down and joined us. And again, this was the first time that we actually brought together this cataclysmic meeting between the two Chris's. Hello, Chris's. So many Chris's. Yeah. Anyway, no, I mean, in truth, it's like that we have so many friends in archaeology named Chris, but it was a great conversation, and that was one of the things that we were talking about over lunch is, look at all the knowledge that Chris Corley brings into this as a dedicated amateur, and then wanting to go and work. And by the time we get out there to White Pond, he's already there. He had gone, he was volunteering, and he was out there. He and Dan Newbanks both volunteering on Chris Moore's site. And it's wonderful to be able to. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that we bridge that gap, but that's what we want to try and do. we want to try and get more serious-minded amateurs working with and for professionals in the furtherance of good, responsible knowledge that we can apply to archaeological discovery. And everybody can play a part, and this is really, I think, fundamental to what Seven Ages is all about. Shifting gears here for a moment, although I do want to remind folks again, if you're at home, if you aren't following us over at sevenages.org, you can do that not only here for this live program tonight, which there at sevenages.org we have the page where you can call in. It has the information, and I'll give you those numbers again here in a moment, because as we are winding down, it's not too late to get in a call with a question. We've got a lot of friends out there who we know are listening, who we might like to hear from if you're there. But I will also mention that you can also find all the ways that you can follow us online right there at sevenages.org, which include our Instagram account. Seven Ages is on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook and, of course, on the YouTube channel where we are right here and now. So if you are finding this, if you happen to upon this tonight, you're interested in archaeology and you'd never heard about us before, consider following our YouTube channel and subscribe. That way you can keep up with our work. And when we have additional documentaries, films, videos, episodes of our podcast that James uploads, or even live shows like this, you'll be notified. And you'll know that those are coming up, and we're looking forward to future episodes of live streams and programs like this. This is a lot of fun. We enjoy it. Before we wrap up the program tonight, however, I do want to one last time, at very least, open the phone lines for folks out there. If you're anywhere in the continental United States, you can call into the program via phone. Just dial 1-828-398-4886. That's the number to reach us there. Of course, that is at sevenages.org on the page right there where we have our live stream, 1-828-398-4886. You can also text message the program, send a text message to us, fast blast across space and time to the number 828-367-7201. So those are the two ways to reach us. Our interactive chats are there on our YouTube page and right here at sevenages.org. where Chris Moore and Christina Frawley, one of our longtime supporters, are engaging with us there in the chat, and a lot of other folks too. We've got the Honey Badger in there saying hello, guys, and hey, right back to you. The fine fellows over there with the A Life in Ruins podcast, and boy, I don't know if anybody said this yet, but it's a great name for that podcast. We really like the name of the show as much as the work that they're doing. And of course, we've got the CT Radio 85. We've got Rune, my good man, in the land of ice and snow over there. John Lowe, my wonderful assistant Lauren tuning in also. David Howell, Jess Yarborough, all kinds of folks out there. Anybody I've missed, I apologize. There are too many to count. But we've had a lot of folks who've been chiming in over the course of the evening. Chris Cottrell calling in. We'd like to hear from you. So one more time, those numbers, if you'd like to join the program, are 828-398-4886. And the text message number 828-367-7201. Okay, got all the numbers out of the way.
That's right. And we've heard from a lot of our fellow researchers and a lot of our friends in the community. I would really love to hear from a listener who we haven't met yet. I would just love to hear some feedback and some ideas that you may have as a listener. What would you like to hear on the show? We're always, considering what you guys want. We want to know what you would like to hear about. And so call in, give us some suggestions, use the text, use the either one of the chats that we have available. We have a couple other things that we've been asked about recently, which, I want to throw again out to the listeners. People have been interested in Seven Ages merchandise. And so we do have an idea, at least, to sort of possibly pursue that in the coming months. So we'll keep everybody updated. Other things we're considering would be something like a newsletter. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, give us some feedback and just let us know, what are your thoughts? What would you like to see more of, less of? And certainly we want to know what ideas you would like to see on the show. So, call in, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you would like to see, and we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to get back up to Serpent Mound.
Yeah. I want another shot at shooting some more video up there, actually.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because that was sort of like our first real trip. And, speaking for myself, I wasn't quite as savvy on the video, taking video and then doing the different things that we've done. And we've got some good products out there now. But I feel like we sort of, or at least for myself, I sort of didn't get as much out of it as I probably could on a second trip.
Well, it would be worth going back up there for a few reasons. One, of course, 7 Ages. We have some connections with Ohio archaeology now. Of course, we have our
Right.
drone. We didn't have our drone. It's hard to imagine us going into the field. Talk about the unofficial fourth member. It's our drone, the man moth. But to imagine going into the field without the man moth, I couldn't. But you know, I want to get back up there because it's just been a place. In fact, actually, the Buckeye Biz herself, Miss Nicole, our good friend up there in Ohio, who's followed my podcasting endeavors for a number of years, she wrote to me a while ago and she said, "Look, if you go back to Serpent Mound, one stipulation, you got to call me. I'm coming out there with you guys." And I said, "Okay, I'll take you up on that." And you know, so I think a lot of our listeners share that interest in that site. And I'd mentioned earlier, I'd asked our brother Lash Laroux if he had listened to Graham Hancock's. You know, I say listen because as I was mowing my yard today, I was listening to the audiobook of Graham Hancock's new book, America Before. Now, totally goes without saying that in terms of, you know, establishment, archaeological, anthropological perspectives, Graham Hancock is controversial. He is not an archaeologist, and he'll be the first that will tell you that. And so he accepts that his views sometimes fall out of line with mainstream academicians in this field. And although I don't agree with everything that Graham Hancock has proposed over the years, there are a lot of things I admire about him, and I'm very pleased, I think, to see that many of our friends in archaeology seem to feel the same way, in the sense that they appreciate the willingness to entertain bold ideas and to follow certain lines of thought that may be unpopular at times. Because I'm going to tell you something. In the history of archaeology or any other branch of the sciences, there will have always been an idea that seems unpopular, which, when followed, may lead to new knowledge, new discovery, new understanding. Our good friend, Dr. Chris Moore, you know, there in the chat room, he had posted a quote earlier, and I do want to share this. I hope he won't mind. It said, "Often resisted with fervor and quickly deemed dead on arrival by scholars working and publishing within the existing paradigm, historically consensus views have often been guided as much by quests for personal gain, prestige, or for control over the driving narrative of scientific research rather than unbiased assessments of the evidence. Of course, it is a truism in scientific archaeology that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Good scientific discourse demands." And again, I think that really kind of summarizes everything, both in terms of the resistance some have to Graham Hancock's ideas, as well as, I think, the necessity for having Graham Hancock and people who are willing to think outside the box. Because in this book, he features people like our good friend, Dr. Al Goodyear. You know, he mentions Christopher Moore and his, again, many contributions to archaeology and to geoarchaeology, and many other people too. And I find it a very important time that we're in right now, guys, because although I was going to introduce Serpent Mound with this, really we could equally get into the Younger Dryas thing, which our listeners had asked us to talk about a bit earlier. That's one thing I have to say that I think that Graham Hancock has spearheaded. Agree or disagree with him on all points, he has absolutely been willing to entertain a possibility that at one time seemed far less likely and thereby was far more controversial. There was a lot more resistance to the idea. In recent years, we have seen some of the brightest minds in archaeology, no less among them, you know, the likes of James Kennett, who, Jason, you and I, not on a podcast, but off the microphone, were gifted with a couple of hours of conversation with him. Dr. Albert Goodyear, and many others who have begun to really look deeply at the potential for an alternative theory as to the causal relationship between the effects we were seeing climatologically around 12,900 years ago. And again, well, again, what we recognize as the Younger Dryas event. It's been widely believed that there's a simple explanation for this. Meltwater runoff, you know, from glacial Lake Agassiz, et cetera, into the North Atlantic disrupts the thermohaline circulation. This causes temperature fluxes all around the world. But as mounting evidence with an alternative perspective forthcoming over the years has at least suggested, if not outright determined, that there's possibly something else going on here. And again, what the theory is that this could involve something akin to a impact event. And hence the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. As more information forthcoming suggests that possibility and not only supports the idea but perhaps strengthens the case, it is a very interesting time for archaeology. And so, as much as people may be have an aversion to ideas like those of Graham Hancock, that there's a lost civilization and there's this broader connectivity, between ancient cultures, that may or may not be the case. But secondary to all of that, he's absolutely been willing, bold, and brave enough to go on the record and say, look, guys, maybe we do need to be looking at the idea of I know it's sensational, but hell, sometimes it happens that a cataclysm might have happened a long time ago. There is plenty of evidence that supports this, and maybe it's time we turn our attention to that possibility, lest, God forbid, it happen again and we are unprepared. In that context, I think it's incredibly important. And so I think that, whether you are an establishment academician, and your background is exclusively in archaeological, training and field schools, and you've got a background, in the academic realm, or if you were a person who is a self-educated amateur, like myself, an avocationalist. I sit here in the midst of a couple of guys with a master's degree and a professional geologist, with a bachelor's degree and also certification in geology, working for the Army Corps of Engineers. These guys are far more qualified and well above my pay grade. I'm just the guy who reads a lot. But again, and actually Graham Hancock's far more than that. He's got a degree in sociology, but and also worked for the Guardian, or I'm sorry, not the Guardian, but the Economist for a number of years as a professional journalist before putting all those things aside and getting into this unpopular field. He didn't do it for his health. He didn't do it because he thought that this was going to make him popular. If anything, he is equally unpopular in many circles, and yet he maintains that this is necessary and that this is in the furtherance of broader human understanding. What I'm getting at is that I think sometimes it is the debate and the discourse that emerges between opposing ideas, the back and forth in a scholarly, gentlemanly, or gentlewomanly way that actually is the most conducive to the furtherance of knowledge. And all these things are necessary in this broader debate that we're having right now, and hence why I think this is such an important time to be studying these things.
Yeah, Mike, I agree with you. And I think that Graham performs a function that that a lot of people wish that they could perform, but they can't for various reasons. So I think it's very important that I think it's important he does what he does. And none of his ideas are correct, but I will say a lot of his suppositions in a broader sense have turned out to be fairly accurate, over time, especially in, a lot of his earlier works. Now there's things in his books that are pretty far out. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on though is from a geological standpoint, because when we talk about the Younger Dryas thing, to me, that's less to do with archaeology as it's more to do with geology, with the geology of the planet. And I think sometimes in the scientific climate today that there's a misunderstanding that there's two crowds of scientists, where there's people that just believe in like gradualism and uniformitarianism, and then there's people that scientists that only prescribe to catastrophism. But any real student of the science knows that it's actually both. It's a combination of both things. So we do have long periods of just gradual processes in this uniformitarian process, and that's absolutely true. And it's also 100% true that these periods, these long boring periods, you could say, are interrupted by massive planetary-wide catastrophes. We have massive outbreaks of volcanism. We have extraterrestrial impacts. We have massive earthquakes. We have upsets in the solar system, things that we don't even understand that cause the Earth become a snowball. Almost the whole planet is covered in ice at one time. We have mass extinctions. There's been 5 mass extinctions in the history of the planet that we know of. So it's a combination of all of these things that produce the Earth as we know it today. So, but for whatever reason, and I guess it has to do somewhat with media and the way things, information gets distributed or whatever today. The perception is that there's like these two camps, but I don't think that's really the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's Wow, there's so much to to get into there. You know, I think right now we've kind of hinted at it tonight, and people have asked about it. But you know, the younger Dryas impact, it's it's something that's been hot and heavy the last couple years. Um, Constant research, constant papers coming out. It's just been one of those topics that's kind of been all encompassing. And as we've said in the past, the importance of a generalist, someone who can synthesize all of the information that's available. And there's been sides drawn on certain things, such as the Carolina Bays. There's been sides drawn on various aspects of, was it an impact? Was it an air burst? Did it even really happen at all? There's people who argue that the extinctions at the end of the Pleistocene were due to an overkill hypothesis of this Clovis killing machine that just shows up and sweeps across the nation and kills everything. And then, others say, well, these mass extinctions are the result of the impact itself, of rapid climate change, degradation of the environment, and slowly starts killing off all of these various types of animals, species, game, all the things that we know to have happened at the end of the Pleistocene. This right now, I think, is probably the most dynamic and fluid and quickly evolving area of research in North America, to say the least, because it is encompassing of so many different disciplines. So like you said, James, it's more of a geology thing, but there's an archaeological aspect to it. And now we're beginning to see, I think a lot more people are opening their eyes to the importance of a collective.
Right.
Various scientists working together, archaeologists, geologists, environmentalists, climatologists, all throwing in ideas into the ring to kind of get that whole picture.
Yeah,
Now
it's an interdisciplinary effort.
Yeah, and that's a must. And I think really it's been a catalyst, regardless of which side of these issues you're on. It's been a catalyst for recognizing the importance, because as we know, in the last 50 years, we've seen the rise of the specialist. So many scientists are just specialized in one thing. Same thing within the medical field. It's, I only do hands, I only do feet, I only do joints, so on and so forth. And that's good, because when you have to have a surgery or you have to have something addressed, you want someone who knows that one body part inside out. But sometimes they get tunnel vision. And that's why it's important for there to be a collective. 7 Ages Research Associates. People have asked me about that name. They said, what does that mean? Who are the associates? Well, the three of us here tonight are the primary core, but everybody that we work with, we consider part of the associates. So whether it's Dr. Chris Moore, Dr. Albert Goodyear, Shane Miller, it goes on and on and on, all the great people that we've had. Once we talk to you, once we've established that connection, you can bet that we're going to be bouncing ideas off of you. We're going to be approaching you about research. We're going to be asking you your opinion on things as we're discovering new information. So that is our collective. That is our research associates. So, regardless, and it doesn't matter if you're a scientist, if you're a learned person and you have a drive and a desire and you can contribute something, even if it's something like, hey, there's a site on my private land that I think somebody should come look at. You're an associate because you have a love for the preservation. You have a love for the knowledge. So we consider that part of our family. So when really it should be the 7 Ages family. And that's how we look at it, because we keep in touch with these guys. We talk to these people all the time. And so it's important for us to have those relationships. And it's as we move forward with this research with the younger Dryas impact, because it's not going away, folks. This is going to be the thing to research for probably the next decade, if not 20 or 30 years, because we're going to keep finding out more about it. The Hiawatha crater that's been discovered recently in Greenland, everything else that's going on, we have to figure out what's part of this and what's not part of this. Information coming out of South America right now, mind-blowing stuff. The platinum anomaly, all the things that go along with this science is going to continue to get refined. And I really think that getting in here at the ground level with these scientists, it gives us the unique opportunity to move forward with the science, to move forward with the studies, and whatever we can contribute, even if it's just being a science communicator and getting the information out to you as listeners. If that's the only role we can play, we're more than honored to do so. But this is the topic right now, and there's plenty of other great archaeological discoveries, and we're going to, talk about those as well. But we are beginning to learn more and more about what's going on, and getting a better idea. Last episode we just had with Dr. Jesse Halligan. If you're listening, Jesse, we again thank you for your time and your attention, and giving us that for the episode. And we've got a lot of really good feedback on that episode. People were really happy to hear her. A lot of people were familiar with Paige Latz, and a lot of people were not. So, every day we're learning something new. But as far as the impact goes, I see that as the future of study within multidisciplinary scientific areas. And I think that's where we're going to be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that the younger Dryas impact is probably the big discovery of our time, as far as really geology and archaeology go. I think it's very analogous to the Chicxulub crater discovery back in the late in the 80s, in the late 70s and the 80s, when that theory was going through its throes to come into the mainstream. And now it's accepted science. Almost nobody disputes that. And I think we're 50% there probably with the younger Dryas impact. So 10 years from now, I think it'll be a given. It'll be something that's taught probably as course material in universities and bachelor's programs for geology and for archaeology and probably various other subjects. And what I think is fascinating about this is the process that these scientists go through, and in a larger sense, all of us kind of go through to get this thing from this basically a fringe theory to become this kind of a fringe hypothesis to this robust theory to basically accepted scientific doctrine. That's really sort of very very intriguing to me, and sort of I'm not a sociologist, but I do have broad interests. I'm a geologist, but I kind of consider myself a generalist in a lot of ways, because I have a lot of broad interests in a lot of things. So this whole thing is very interesting to me, and the way it unfolds, and it has a very the thing about science is it's not a very clinical thing in a lot of ways. It's a very human process. So we have to work these things out, and we have to work these things out amongst ourselves until we finally come to the accepted conclusion, until something new and better comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. New and better things come along every day. Fun fact for folks at home, the original prototype version of the Seven Ages theme song did not feature a banjo and punk rock music, as is known and loved today. In fact, it featured yours truly playing the violin. And that's historically relevant in this conversation, because there are two kinds of cataclysms. There are those natural cataclysms that occur, and then there are those man-made cataclysms, which brings us to the important date which we are about to embark upon. Fellas, it's about time for us to go back in time.
All the bits of history.
Right. Got to look at the weird stuff going on in history from time to time. Make things interesting, right? We study the past.
Right.
We don't screw it up tomorrow for everybody else. Now, according to NationalGeographic.com, on July 19th in the year 64 CE, a fire started in the enormous Circus Maximus Stadium in Rome, now the capital of Italy. And when the fire was finally extinguished 6 days later, 10 of Rome's 14 districts had been burned. Yes, of course, we were discussing the Great Fire of Rome. But now we've got to get into a little bit of historical snooping, or maybe actually in the modern parlance, we would say snopesing. The fact check here. Hold on. Let me see if I got my fact check soundbite. I think I've got one of those. Yeah, here we go.
Warning, fake news alert. Warning, fake news alert.
Did Nero actually play the violin while Rome burned? What the hell was he thinking? Well, they say, according to National Geographic here, ancient historians blamed Rome's infamous Emperor Nero for the fire. One historian said Nero was playing the fiddle while his city went up in flames. Other historians say Nero wanted to raise the city so he could build a new palace. Nero himself blamed a rebellious new cult called the Christians, only because the Scientologists weren't around back then, or the Raelians for that matter. But anyway, I digress. Most modern historians, however, say that Nero, they say they don't blame him actually for the Great Fire of Rome. Ancient Rome, they say, was a city of more than 2 million people, with thousands living in slums. These slums were filled with poorly constructed wooden apartment buildings. A fire in one apartment could quickly engulf an entire block. But again, the question I have about whether or not he actually played the violin, well, here's the whole thing about that. As I understand it, the violin, I don't think, came along until centuries later during the Renaissance. It's highly unlikely that Nero would have played a violin unless he was indeed, as we've long suspected, a time traveler. In which case, if I see him in this cross-time pub one more time, fellas, he's getting the boot. But there's your odd bit of history for today. Although I do play the violin, I'm not from Rome. But hey, we were talking about something the other day on the telephone with regard to Rome. Some would say all roads lead there. I would say this. Look at Rome. Look how long Rome was the epicenter of human civilization. That too fell. And so in the broader context of these discussions about cataclysms and how quickly stuff can go the way of the dinosaurs, is it all that crazy to suppose for a moment that, hey, you know what? Stuff can get real, like really real quick. What happens? We know that Jason Pentrail would survive because he's an expert flint kniffer, but what happens to the rest of us when fecal matter hits the spinning turbine and Rome proverbially burns again?
I would say die in place.
Yeah, in reality, we've talked about this way too much, probably on the road trips and things like that. But flint napping doesn't make clean water, and it's one of those things that in a modern society, everything's wired in. So literally, we could expect probably 80% of the population to be gone almost immediately if you stop and think about how many people need prescription drugs. For things like heart conditions and blood pressure and cholesterol and various other ailments. That's a big chunk of the population. When we have these heat waves like we're in right now, if you didn't have a shelter, if you didn't have air conditioning and things like that, and you're an older person or someone with compromised immune system or somebody with health issues, a heat wave like this could be life-ending for you. So there's many, many factors to consider. There's very few people that could actually live for any length of time. Plus, you got to remember things like nuclear plants shutting down, everything's going to go. Sewage backup, water, everything that we depend on is essentially gone. So that leaves very few people that could actually survive. And then the question becomes, survive for how long to do what? Then what? So honestly, with the Taurid meteor stream and everything that we're involved with right now, if the big one's going to hit, I hope it lands right on top of my house.
Yeah.
Then at least you don't have to worry about it.
Then we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
takes the guesswork out of it anyway.
James, at least he's got an optimistic outlook on things. Hey, I'm very optimistic because I keep extraordinarily good company. And thanks to both of you gentlemen for both educating me and also keeping me in the loop on things that are going on out there. All of you guys at home, we appreciate you and your continuing support of the 7 Ages Research Associates. If you aren't already there at the website, here's how you can learn about what we do. You can head over to 7 Ages, that's the word 7, ages.org. And there, of course, you can not only subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and all other podcasting mediums, you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us here on YouTube. And, of course, you can also email any of us, Micah, that's me, Jason, or James at 7ages.org. Those are the emails to reach us. We hope sincerely to hear from you guys again. And we hope also that it won't be so long until the next time we do one of these live shows. They're always a lot of fun, and we appreciate the opportunity provided to be able to get here in front of the microphone, talk with you guys, and share in our mutual interest and our passion for the ancient past. Anybody?
Crickets? Anybody? Hey,
out there?
Gentlemen, I salute you. It's been a find time. You know what? I honestly, usually I don't want to get off the microphone, but I'm not going to lie. We were talking about, heat waves and all that. It is hot in this freaking room, man. It is really hot in here. So I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to drink another beer, and then I'm going to call it a night, man.
Yeah, well, hey, it's been a great night. Again, we want to thank everybody who called in. Thank you for your time, spending a little bit of your evening with us here tonight. Keep an eye out. And again, remember, we need you to rate, review, and subscribe. And we will have new content coming up here soon. And just stay tuned, because 7 Ages always has something going on.
We absolutely always do. So, for those of you out there who are history and archaeological enthusiasts, we will catch you guys next time somewhere, someplace, sometime out there. It is the 7 Ages Audio Journal.